Scattered across the globe are places so surreal, so visually astonishing, that they seem to belong more to dreams than to reality. These natural wonders defy logic and expectation. Rivers that glow with rainbow colors, forests that twist like ancient riddles, deserts that bleed, and waterfalls that tumble straight into the sea from emerald cliffs. In this journey, we'll explore some of the most unreal locations on Earth, where geology, climate, and time have sculpted scenes that feel like glimpses into another world. Mysterious, breathtaking, and utterly unforgettable. But before we continue, subscribe to the channel and like the video. In the heart of Colombia's remote Sierra de la Macarena lies a river so surreal that locals and travelers alike refer to it as the river that escaped from paradise. Known as Cono Cristales, or more poetically, the liquid rainbow, this marvel is not merely a river but a living, flowing canvas of brilliant color, one that defies expectation and redefines what we believe nature is capable of. Hidden within the biodiversity-rich National Park of Serranía de la Macarena, this river remains untouched by industrialization, which allows it to maintain its pristine, dreamlike beauty. It is a place where color is not a surface illusion but an integral part of the water itself, shifting with the seasons, the sun, and the delicate rhythms of aquatic life. What makes Cono Cristales so extraordinary is the presence of an aquatic plant species known as Macarenia clavigera. During the wet and dry transitional periods, usually between late July and early November, this endemic plant bursts into an explosion of colors, red being the most dominant, but often accompanied by vivid greens, bright yellows, electric blues, and shimmering purples. The entire riverbed becomes a riot of hues, flowing like molten glass beneath the clear waters. Depending on the lighting and angle, the scene can resemble spilled oil, stained glass, or a dreamscape from a fantasy novel. The river's shallow areas reveal intricate textures of plant life, rocks, and shifting currents, while deeper pools reflect the sky in mirror-like clarity, merging reality with illusion. But the phenomenon is not merely about the plant itself, it is a symphony of environmental conditions. The clarity of the river is essential, as it allows the sun to penetrate and activate the photosynthetic properties of Macarenia clavigera. The surrounding geography helps preserve these conditions. The region receives abundant rainfall but is also elevated just enough to prevent oversaturation, and the underlying rock formations, part of the ancient Guiana Shield, provide both mineral richness and structural pathways that channel the water with gentle flow and clarity. This delicate balance is why Cono Cristales does not bloom all year round. It must be visited during its optimal season, or else the visitor is greeted with an unremarkable waterway that gives no hint of its magical alter ego. Getting to Cono Cristales is not an easy task, and that is part of its allure. Travelers must typically fly into Villavicencio, then board a small charter plane to La Macarena, a tiny town at the edge of the wilderness. From there, a combination of riverboat journeys, horseback rides, and hiking treks take visitors deeper into the jungle and toward the hidden river. There are no large hotels or modern infrastructure in the park, which has kept mass tourism at bay and preserved its fragile ecosystem. Visitors are required to travel with a licensed guide, and rules are strict. Swimming is limited to specific sections, sunscreen is banned to protect the aquatic flora, and every traveler must undergo orientation to minimize human impact. The experience of being at Cono Cristales transcends sightseeing. It is not merely a visual spectacle but an immersion into the untouched heart of nature. Birds like the scarlet macaw soar overhead while monkeys chatter from the trees. The surrounding Macarena Mountains echo with the hum of cicadas and the distant roar of waterfalls. Often, the river seems to shimmer even without direct sunlight, as if it contains its own inner light. The air is rich with the scent of wet earth and foliage, and every step along the riverbank reveals another angle, another moment where the colors shift and play with your perception. Culturally, Cono Cristales has held sacred significance for indigenous groups like the Guayabero people. They believe the river is a living spirit, a source of life and transformation, its changing colors symbolizing the ever-moving cycle of existence. In their oral traditions, the river is not just a waterway but a bridge between worlds, a ribbon connecting the seen and unseen. Even today, visitors often describe an almost spiritual reaction when encountering the river for the first time. An emotional swell that comes from witnessing a natural phenomenon that no photograph or video can truly capture. And yet, despite its incredible beauty, Cono Cristales remains under constant threat. Climate change, deforestation in surrounding areas, and the lingering scars of Colombia's civil conflict have all taken their toll. Conservation efforts are ongoing and have received a boost since the river began attracting international attention, but the fragility of the site cannot be overstated. It is one of those rare places on Earth where human admiration must be balanced with restraint, where preservation takes precedence over convenience. Cono Cristoles is a rare confluence of geography, botany, and climate, a living rainbow set into the stone heart of Colombia. It challenges our understanding of rivers not as passive conveyors of water, but as active, changing entities that reflect the complexity and beauty of life itself. In a world filled with digital manipulation and artificial wonders, Cono Cristoles remains real, achingly, breathtakingly, improbably real. It is a reminder that the most fantastical landscapes are not imagined, but grown, nurtured, and hidden in the deep veins of our planet, waiting for those willing to journey far enough to find them. Rising from the rugged spine of Flores Island in Indonesia, Mount Kelimutu is a relatively modest volcano by global standards, but what it lacks in elevation it more than makes up for in mystique. At its summit lie three surreal crater lakes, each perched precariously along the volcano's rim like celestial mirrors to the sky, except that these mirrors shimmer with colors so vibrant, so mercurial, that they appear conjured from the palette of a dreaming god. The Kelimutu crater lakes, as they are known, are one of Earth's most bizarre and breathtaking natural spectacles. Three neighboring volcanic pools that inexplicably change color, sometimes turquoise, other times green, blood red, jet black, or chocolate brown, each with its own independent rhythm, chemistry, and aura. The lakes are collectively called Tiwu Atam Bupu, Lake of Old People, Tiwu Nuamuri Ku Fai, Lake of Young Men and Maidens, and Tiwu Atapolo, Lake of Enchanted or Bewitched Spirits, names inherited from the local Leo people, who have long considered these waters sacred. According to indigenous belief, the spirits of the dead migrate to these lakes, each soul directed to a particular lake based on their life's virtues, vices, and unresolved fate. The ever-changing hues, to the locals, are not chemical coincidences but reflections of spiritual turmoil, the unrest or peace of the souls below the surface. Scientifically, the phenomenon is attributed to complex geochemical processes involving the emission of volcanic gases, particularly hydrogen sulfide and sulfur dioxide, which interact with the minerals and oxygen levels within each lake. These processes cause oxidation reactions that lead to dramatic color shifts, sometimes slowly over years, and other times seemingly overnight. What's extraordinary is that each lake, despite being within the same caldera complex and receiving similar rainfall, maintains a different chemical composition. It's not merely that they change color, but that they do so independently. While one might be emerald green, another could simultaneously be rust red or ink black. This rare trifecta of instability and contrast makes the Kelimutu lakes a unique geological puzzle that continues to baffle and delight researchers. Tiwu Atam Bupu, the westernmost lake, is generally the calmest in terms of color, often a deep blue or dark green. It is believed to house the spirits of the elderly, those who have lived long, honorable lives. The stillness and darker shades are thought to reflect wisdom and contemplation. This lake is slightly isolated from the other two, both physically and energetically, separated by a narrow ridge of rock that seems to divide not only space but realms. Tiwu Nuamuri Ku Fai, typically the most strikingly turquoise, lies adjacent to Tiwu Atapolo. Its vibrancy is a visual counterpoint to its spiritual association, the souls of young people who died before their time. The lake has an eerie, innocent brightness that glows even under overcast skies, as if lit from within. It is sometimes so luminous that it appears artificially dyed, a shade of blue too saturated to be believed. Beside it, Tiwu Atapolo is the most temperamental. Often blood red or black, it's associated with wrongdoers and those who have committed evil in life. This lake is volatile both in color and mood, at times steaming, at times flat, but always possessing a kind of simmering energy. It is here that visitors often report a sense of unease, as if the lake is watching or waiting. Despite being only a few meters from the vibrant youth lake, this one feels darker in every sense, in tone, in folklore, and in chemical composition. From a distance, the lakes appear nestled inside the jagged embrace of the volcano's summit like colored gemstones cradled in ash. The surrounding cliffs are often cloaked in mist, especially during sunrise, when the entire caldera is transformed into a floating island above the clouds. The sight is otherworldly, three alien pools glowing beneath a spectral sky, shifting their colors as the light changes, as the gases churn, as the spirits stir. Reaching Mount Kelimutu requires determination. The nearest town is Moni, a quiet village where time moves slowly and visitors are few. From there, the journey to the crater involves a steep drive and then a final ascent on foot. Most travelers begin the hike before dawn to witness the sunrise over the lakes, a moment when the light pierces the mist and casts a surreal halo over the volcanic bowls. It is then that the colors seem most alive, most unreal. The lakes appear not to reflect the world, but to reject it, offering their own alien spectrum. Despite its relative remoteness, Kelimutu has captured the imagination of poets, painters, and explorers for centuries. It was first documented by Dutch colonial geologists in the early 20th century. But even then, the indigenous Leo people had long known of its power. They performed rituals on the caldera rim, throwing offerings of betel nut, rice, and even chickens into the lakes to appease the ancestral spirits. Today, those rituals are rarely practiced, but the aura remains. Many local guides will still ask visitors to tread lightly, to speak softly, to approach the lakes not as tourists but as witnesses to something sacred and strange. Perhaps what makes the Kelimutu crater lakes so haunting is the feeling that they are alive, not metaphorically, but in the way they breathe, change, react. They are not inert landscapes, but dynamic, reactive forces. You do not simply look at them, you experience them. They mirror not just the skies above, but the myths we carry, the uncertainties we hold, and the ever-shifting nature of our world. In a sense, Kelimutu offers us a lesson that change is constant, that beauty can be volatile, and that even death is not the end but a transformation, a change of color, a new current in the water. In the scorched heart of Namibia's Namib-Norcluft National Park, within the oldest desert on Earth, lies a place so stark, so silent, and so visually arresting that it almost defies the definition of a landscape. This is Dedvlei, a parched white clay pan nestled among towering vermilion dunes, where twisted black skeletons of trees reach skyward in eerie stillness, their forms frozen in time under the punishing desert sun. There is no wind here, no water, and almost no life. And yet, this graveyard of trees is one of the most iconic and surreal places on the planet. A natural painting carved in contrasts, shadows, and silence. The word Dedvlei comes from Afrikaans, meaning dead marsh. It was once, inconceivably, a thriving wetland, a shallow, clay-rich basin where the Tsorchab River would occasionally flood after rare rains, allowing camelthorn trees, Vachellia areoloba, to flourish. For a brief window in its ancient past, this pan was filled with life. But then, climate change shifted the balance. Massive dunes, including some of the tallest in the world, migrated with the winds and cut the valley off from the river. Without the life-giving floodwaters, the pan dried up and the trees died. But in the cruelly preserving conditions of this hyper-arid environment, they never decayed. The sun scorched them black, and the air grew too dry for microbes to decompose them. Now, 600 to 700 years later, their charred skeletons still stand like mournful sculptures against a backdrop of brilliant orange sand and a sky of uninterrupted cobalt blue. The ground beneath your feet at Dedvlei is unlike any other. It's a hard, cracked, almost porcelain-white clay surface that crunches faintly under your steps. The clay has hardened into polygonal patterns over centuries of drying and baking, creating natural tessellations that add another surreal element to an already dreamlike tableau. Standing in the middle of the pan, one feels both awe and vulnerability. The silence is total, not metaphorically, but literally. There is no rustling, no birdsong, no trickling water. Only the occasional whisper of wind brushing past the dunes. It is, in a way, a museum of desolation, a place where time is visible, where entropy has been sculpted into something unnaturally beautiful. Towering above the pan are the iconic dunes of Sossusvlei, among them the legendary Big Daddy, which rises over 325 meters, 1,066 feet, above the desert floor. From a distance, these dunes glow with a deep red hue, a result of iron oxide slowly accumulating over millions of years. Their shapes are graceful, sweeping ridges and soft curves carved by wind, but their scale is daunting. Climbing one is a strenuous, breathless endeavor, yet the view from the top, especially at sunrise or sunset, is otherworldly. The play of light and shadow across the dunes is hypnotic, a slow-motion wave of amber, blood orange, and deep crimson, revealing the contours of a desert that is constantly in motion, even when it appears still. But from above, Dedvlei appears like a crack in the landscape, a ghostly white island in a sea of red sand, dotted with the stark silhouettes of blackened trees. It is here that photographers, artists, and travelers have been drawn for decades, unable to resist the surreal palette and almost impossible contrast. Images of Dead Valley are often mistaken for paintings or digital creations because the juxtaposition of elements is so visually extreme. There is no gradual blending between the clay, the trees, the dunes, and the sky, only bold, definitive separations, like brushstrokes on a minimalist canvas. Yet this place is not just visually unreal, it is spiritually heavy. For the indigenous Nama and Damara people, this desert and its formations are alive with ancestral meaning. The pan and its trees are seen not as dead, but as sleeping, guardians of an ancient past that still echoes faintly through the sand. In local oral tradition, the desert is both a protector and a punisher, a sacred presence that humbles all who enter. This reverence is echoed in the behavior of most visitors. No loud voices, no music, just quiet footsteps and long shadows. Dead Valley is not easy to reach. Travelers typically base themselves in the small town of Cesarium, where the gates to Namib Norcluft Park open just before dawn. From there, a 60-kilometer drive along the desert floor leads to the base of the dunes. The final stretch requires a transfer to a 4x4 vehicle capable of navigating the loose sand. From the drop-off point, it's a 20 to 30-minute hike through the dunes, with no shade and punishing heat, especially by mid-morning. But every step toward Dead Valley feels like an approach to another planet, one that was once fertile, then forgotten, and finally fossilized in splendor. Interestingly, the seemingly lifeless pan is not entirely devoid of movement. Occasionally, moisture from an unseasonal fog, carried inland from the Atlantic Ocean by cool morning winds, brings a whisper of vitality to the surface. Small insects, adapted to thrive in extreme aridity, can be spotted skittering across the cracked clay. Lichens cling to rocks on the shaded edges of the dunes. But this life is microscopic and fleeting, a faint heartbeat in an otherwise petrified world. And then there are the trees. Each one is unique, twisted, hollowed, split by lightning or warped by centuries of heat, yet they all seem to share a common posture, arms outstretched, as if frozen mid-reach for something just beyond their grasp. They are the skeletal memory of a forest that once was, and a warning of how quickly abundance can turn to silence. They do not fall, they do not rot, they endure. Dead Valley is not merely an unreal place, it is a confrontation with time, climate, and impermanence. It reminds us of the fragility of ecosystems and the terrifying beauty of their collapse. It stands in perfect contrast, white and black, life and death, fluid dunes and static trees, sky above and desert below. It is a place that feels mythic, primordial, and quietly apocalyptic, not because it is broken, but because it has been preserved in the moment of its undoing. In Dead Valley, nature doesn't whisper. It paints in silence, bold and unforgettable. Tucked within the sprawling delta of the Liaohe River in northeastern China lies a phenomenon so visually arresting, so implausibly vivid, that it often causes first-time visitors to question the evidence of their own eyes. This is Red Beach in Panjin, a sprawling wetland that, for much of the year, appears like any other salt marsh, tranquil and green. But come autumn, it undergoes a transformation so radical, so saturated in color, that the entire landscape turns into a sea of crimson. This is no illusion, no man-made spectacle. It is a living, breathing, photosynthesizing marvel, a blanket of Sueda salsa, or seepweed, whose annual metamorphosis paints the coastal flats blood red and transforms this corner of China into something resembling the surface of Mars. Despite its name, Red Beach is not a beach in the traditional sense. There is no sand, no crashing surf. Instead, it's an expanse of soft tidal marshlands woven together by winding waterways, channels, and mudflats, all covered by an ecosystem dominated by this single halophytic plant. The Sueda salsa is uniquely adapted to saline alkali soils, a condition that would kill most flora, but here it thrives. In spring and early summer, it sprouts in shades of green, almost innocuous. But as the seasons progress and temperatures drop, the plant begins to produce protective pigments, chiefly anthocyanins, which give rise to a deep, rich red coloration. By September, the marsh glows like a scarlet tapestry, the red so intense and uniform that aerial photographs often look digitally enhanced. The scale of this transformation is hard to comprehend until one stands amidst it. Stretching across more than 6,800 hectares, around 26 square miles, Red Beach is part of the Shuangtaisi River Estuary Wetland System, one of the largest and best-preserved wetland ecosystems in the world. The saturation of red isn't confined to patches or bands. It covers the landscape in sweeping, endless fields, merging with the blue-grey water channels and reflecting the sky like a surreal oil painting come to life. The contrast between the red plants and the still water, coupled with the occasional sight of a wooden boardwalk or a solitary egret lifting into the sky, creates a scene so cinematic it barely feels terrestrial. Ecologically, Red Beach is more than just a visual marvel, it is a sanctuary. Designated as a national nature reserve, the Panjin Red Beach wetland is a vital breeding ground for over 260 species of birds, including endangered species like the red-crowned crane and the black-faced spoonbill. The cranes, with their elegant white feathers and crimson head markings, are especially symbolic, often appearing against the scarlet background like living brushstrokes from a traditional Chinese painting. Thousands of migratory birds use this wetland as a resting and feeding stop on the East Asia-Australasian Flyway, making it one of the most important avian corridors in the region. Visitors can witness this dreamlike landscape through a series of elevated wooden walkways and observation decks that wind gently through the marsh. These platforms are designed to minimize human disturbance while offering panoramic views of the glowing wetland. The quiet of the place is profound. You hear only the distant calls of birds, the soft rustle of wind moving over the dense marsh, and the occasional lap of water against the reeds. It is not a landscape to be rushed through. It demands reverence, patience, and observation. In the cultural imagination of China, Panjin's Red Beach has taken on symbolic meaning as a place of transformation, renewal, and hidden beauty. It has inspired poetry, classical painting, and modern photography alike, often described as the palette of nature or the bleeding marsh. There's something elemental about it, a primal, almost mythic feeling evoked by seeing the earth bleed color in such a way. It feels like the surface of a forgotten planet, where the soil pulses with life not in shades of green, but in deep, visceral reds. The seepweed itself, though short and unassuming up close, is an evolutionary marvel. It not only survives in harsh saline environments but actually thrives in them, improving soil conditions and preventing coastal erosion. In this sense, Red Beach is also a story of ecological resilience, a landscape that defies conventional beauty and conventional biology. Its bright color is not just an aesthetic miracle, but the plant's built-in survival mechanism, helping it endure high salt levels and intense sunlight. Timing a visit to Red Beach is crucial. The brilliant red only appears for a brief window, typically from mid-September to early October. Come too early, and the fields are still transitioning from green to crimson. Too late, and the color fades into maroon or brown. It's a living clock, seasonal, fleeting, and unrepeatable, and that transience is part of its allure. No 2 years are exactly the same. No 2 sunrises over the wetland are ever replicated. In some moments, mist may rise from the water channels and soften the red into a watercolor haze. In others, a crisp morning sun may ignite the fields into blazing scarlet, almost glowing. Against the pale autumn sky, the surrounding area of Panjin, a lesser-known city in Liaoning province, has leaned into the uniqueness of this natural wonder with care. While tourism has increased, development has been regulated to preserve the integrity of the wetland. Local cuisine, often based on river crabs, reed chicken, and duck raised in the marshlands, offers another layer of experience, allowing visitors to taste the richness of this unique ecosystem. Cultural performances sometimes take place on outdoor stages built along the wetland's edge, with music and dance celebrating both local folklore and the mystique of the Red Marsh. Ultimately, what makes Red Beach truly unreal is not just its color, though that is undeniably otherworldly, but the harmony it represents. It is a place where the extreme and the delicate coexist. A single, salt-loving plant turns desolate soil into a canvas, while flocks of rare birds turn that canvas into a stage for life's migrations. It is a place of silence and spectacle, of seasonal fire and quiet endurance. It doesn't scream for attention. It simply glows, waiting to be discovered by those curious enough to wander to its far northeastern shores. Standing before the red expanse of Panjin's wetland, one doesn't feel the chaos of modern tourism. Instead, you feel the steady breath of a landscape in rhythm with the seasons, ancient, pulsing, painted in red. Amidst the vast, windswept desolation of the Karakum Desert in Turkmenistan, where endless dunes roll into the horizon and the silence feels ancient and oppressive, there exists a sight so surreal and apocalyptic that it seems less a product of nature and more like a scar left by a vengeful god. This is the Darvaza gas crater, more ominously known as the Door to Hell, a gaping pit in the earth, burning ceaselessly with flames that lick the night sky and a glow so intense it can be seen for miles across the flat, barren desert. It is a place where the earth quite literally breathes fire, not metaphorically, not symbolically, but in a continuous and relentless blaze that has raged for over half a century. The origins of the Door to Hell are steeped in both geology and Cold War-era geopolitics. In the early 1970s, when Turkmenistan was still part of the Soviet Union, a team of Soviet geologists was prospecting for oil and natural gas in the Karakum Desert, a region known for its vast underground reserves. Their drilling operation, which initially appeared routine, struck a cavern filled with natural gas. But almost immediately after breaching the surface, the ground beneath their rig collapsed, swallowing the equipment into a newly formed sinkhole roughly 70 meters wide and 20 meters deep. What had once been solid desert ground was now a yawning crater, billowing poisonous methane gas into the air. Fearing that the toxic gas could spread to nearby areas and pose a serious environmental and health risk, not to mention jeopardize future drilling prospects, the geologists made a dramatic decision to set the crater on fire. Their reasoning was grounded in science and precedent. By igniting the gas, they hoped to burn off the dangerous emissions quickly, expecting the fire to exhaust the fuel within a matter of days. That was in 1971. Over 50 years later, the inferno still burns, stronger and more persistent than ever, as if the Earth itself refuses to let it die. Today, the Darvaza crater is an anomaly, a man-made geological accident that has become an enduring and mesmerizing symbol of unintended consequences. The flame-lit abyss is especially haunting at night. As the desert sun sets and darkness envelops the Karakum, the crater begins to glow like a wound in the Earth's crust. The heat can be felt dozens of meters away, and the light casts long, dancing shadows across the dunes, making the surrounding landscape feel even more alien and dreamlike. The flames themselves range from deep orange to bright yellow, constantly shifting and sputtering, producing a low, guttural roar that seems to come from the belly of the planet. Approaching the crater is an experience of sensory overload. The heat is almost unbearable the closer you get. The air becomes thick, heavy, and filled with the faint scent of burning chemicals. The metal railings that now partially circle the rim radiate warmth even at night, and the desert wind, sharp and cold, carries with it the dry, metallic tang of scorched earth and sulfur. Standing at the edge and looking down into the pit feels like gazing into a living furnace, a view that evokes equal parts awe and dread. The flames leap from various fissures along the walls, some small and flickering, others billowing like miniature volcanoes. In the center, the crater glows with a steady intensity, as if it's being stoked from somewhere below by unseen hands. And then there's the silence, or rather, the absence of all familiar noise. There are no birds, no insects, no signs of life. The only sound is the ceaseless exhale of fire and the whispering wind, a soundscape that enhances the illusion that you're standing at the edge of a mythological underworld. At night, when the surrounding desert disappears into darkness, the crater becomes an island of flame in an ocean of shadow, and it's easy to understand why locals and travelers alike began calling it the Door to Hell. Despite its intimidating presence, the crater has become a point of pilgrimage for the rare traveler who dares to venture into Turkmenistan, one of the world's most closed and enigmatic nations. Visitors must endure a long and often challenging journey to reach it. The nearest settlement is the small village of Darvaza, and from there, it's a trek through loose sand and unmarked desert paths. There are no official tour buses, no paved roads, and certainly no modern facilities nearby. Most visitors arrive in rugged 4x4 vehicles and set up camp under the stars, pitching tents within sight of the crater and watching it burn through the night like a primordial beacon. This remoteness only adds to the allure. There's a rawness to the experience that no curated tourist attraction could replicate. You are not herded through gates or kept behind glass. There are no guided tours or hourly presentations. Instead, there is just the fire, the desert, and the knowledge that you are standing above an unstoppable force, a burn that was never meant to last but refuses to end. In recent years, there has been growing discussion within the Turkmen government about extinguishing the fire. Citing environmental concerns and the potential to harness the vast natural gas reserves below, Turkmenistan's leadership has occasionally floated the idea of sealing the crater or finding a way to capture the escaping methane. But each time the plan is announced, it fades away, and the fire continues. The technical challenges are enormous. How does one safely cap a crater that is still unstable and leaking vast quantities of flammable gas? And more than that, there is now a strange cultural inertia to its existence. The door to hell, once an accident, has become an identity. For the desert, for Turkmenistan, and for the idea of Earth's uncontrollable energies made visible. Indeed, the crater is a symbol of both human ambition and human miscalculation. It is a reminder of how we try to harness nature, and how nature often has the final word. What began as a well-intentioned scientific decision to contain danger has instead produced a spectacle that defies our expectations of time and energy. It's a flaming monument to the unforeseen, an eternal campfire lit by accident, now burning into legend. And yet, it captivates us. Because in a world increasingly mapped, moderated, and made safe, there are still places like the Darvaza crater that speak to something deeper, older, and more primal within us. The ancient fear and fascination with fire, the eternal pull toward the edge of the unknown. In the high desert of southern Utah, where the earth seems to fold and ripple like fabric caught in a slow, ancient wind, lies one of the most visually bewildering and awe-inspiring landscapes on the planet, Bryce Canyon National Park. Though not technically a canyon, but rather a series of massive natural amphitheaters carved into the edge of a high plateau, Bryce is a place where geology performs its most delicate and dramatic work. Here, thousands upon thousands of towering rock spires, known as hoodoos, rise from the canyon floor in fiery shades of red, orange, pink, and ivory, like a petrified forest born from flame, frozen mid-bloom in the warm breath of time. To stand at the rim of Bryce Amphitheater, especially at sunrise, is to be confronted with something otherworldly. As the first light of dawn spills across the horizon, the hoodoos begin to glow, shifting from dusky rose to blazing orange, their jagged peaks catching the sun like matchsticks igniting one by one. The colors deepen as the light strengthens, from pastel to rust to crimson, and shadows stretch and contract across the amphitheater in slow motion. The view is not static, it lives, breathes, and changes with the minute, as if the stone itself were participating in the performance of dawn. But it is the sheer scale and number of hoodoos that truly overwhelms the senses. Nowhere else on Earth boasts such a dense concentration of these rock formations. They rise in tangled clusters, winding corridors, solitary columns, and twisted chimneys, no two quite alike. Some are slender as needles, others bulbous and top-heavy, each shaped by millennia of frost wedging and erosional artistry. At first glance, they resemble the ruins of an ancient alien city, their forms suggestive of temples, towers, totems, and sentinels. On closer inspection, they reveal an intricate lacework of ridges and flutes, delicate patterns chiseled by water and wind across spans of geological time that defy human comprehension. The creation of Bryce's hoodoos is a tale of patience and elemental violence. The park lies at the eastern edge of the Pawnsorgant Plateau, a highland region formed during the uplift of the Colorado Plateau tens of millions of years ago. Over epochs, sedimentary layers of limestone, siltstone, dolomite, and mudstone were laid down like sheets, remnants of ancient lakes, rivers, and inland seas. When the plateau began to fracture and erode, these layers were exposed to the relentless effects of water, temperature shifts, and gravity. Unlike other erosion-formed features such as arches or buttes, hoodoos are created through a process called frost wedging. Rainwater seeps into cracks during the day and freezes at night, expanding with tremendous force. Over thousands of freeze-thaw cycles, vertical clefts in the rock are widened, and chunks begin to shear off. Simultaneously, acidic rainwater eats away at the more soluble rock layers, leaving behind resistant spires that rise from the canyon floor like the spines of some slumbering stone leviathan. Trails throughout Bryce Canyon wind down into this labyrinth of rock, pathways like Navajo Loop, Queen's Garden, and Peekaboo Loop that take hikers from the rim down into the heart of the hoodoos. As one descends, the perspective shifts entirely. What seemed orderly and patterned from above becomes chaotic and mysterious from within. The towering spires close in on both sides, casting cool shadows and narrowing the sky to slivers. Some formations are narrow enough to touch on both sides at once. Others open into sudden clearings where light floods in and reveals vast cathedral-like halls of stone. Along the trails, named hoodoos, such as Thor's Hammer, Wall Street, and Queen Victoria loom with silent, enigmatic presence, each formed by the same forces, each possessing a shape so distinct it almost seems intentional. The silence in the canyon is profound, broken only by the whisper of wind, the crunch of gravel underfoot, and the occasional call of a raven circling high above. In winter, snow blankets the tops of the hoodoos in white, creating one of the most ethereal vistas imaginable, a clash of fiery rock and icy elegance, a visual contradiction that heightens the park's already dreamlike character. In summer, the contrast between the cobalt blue sky and the vermilion rock becomes almost painful in its clarity, the kind of light and color that sears itself into memory. Ecologically, Bryce Canyon is as diverse as it is surreal. Perched at elevations ranging from 8,000 to over 9,000 feet, it straddles multiple life zones. On the rim, stands of ponderosa pine, Douglas fir, and bristlecone pine, some over 1,500 years old, cling to the edge of the abyss, their roots twisted deep into the rock. Mule deer, marmots, and even mountain lions roam these forests, while red-tailed hawks and peregrine falcons ride the thermals above. Down in the hoodoo-filled basins, life is more scarce but no less remarkable. Lizards scurry over sun-baked rock, and desert wildflowers bloom in impossible crevices during the brief spring. This intersection of alpine and desert ecosystems gives Bryce its unique biological character, a place where snow meets sandstone and pine meets sagebrush. Culturally and spiritually, the area has long been significant to indigenous peoples, including the Paiute, who lived in and around the canyon for centuries. In their oral traditions, the hoodoos are legend people, ancient beings who were turned to stone by the trickster god Coyote for their wickedness. According to the stories, they once roamed the earth as humans or spirits, but their misdeeds condemned them to eternal petrification. In this way, the hoodoos are not merely geological features but moral relics, warning markers in a spiritual landscape. This worldview infuses the canyon with a sense of sacredness that many visitors still feel, even if they don't know the myths, an unspoken awareness that they are walking among the ghosts of giants. Despite its relatively compact size compared to other U.S. national parks, Bryce Canyon is remarkably varied. Beyond the main amphitheater, lesser-known areas like Bryce Point, Inspiration Point, and Rainbow Point offer equally stunning views, often with fewer visitors. At night, the park transforms yet again. Thanks to its high elevation, dry air, and remote location, Bryce is one of the best stargazing spots in North America. Under a moonless sky, the hoodoos fade into shadow, and the Milky Way emerges in full, breathtaking clarity. The stars arc overhead while the stone spires below remain still, the eternal dance of cosmos and canyon. Ultimately, what makes Bryce Canyon so unreal is its synthesis of contradictions: motion and stillness, fire and frost, silence and spectacle. It is a place where time feels both vast and immediate, where every spire tells a story of slow destruction and improbable beauty. To wander its paths is to step into a living sculpture garden shaped not by human hands, but by wind, water, and the tireless whisper of ice. It is a place that challenges your sense of scale, of permanence, of the natural order itself. At Bryce, the earth doesn't just reveal its bones, it displays them in dizzying patterns, rising toward the heavens in a chorus of color and form that feels more dreamt than discovered. Tucked away in the remote desert landscape of northwestern Nevada, far from the glittering lights of Las Vegas or the alpine lakes of the Sierra, lies a spectacle that seems plucked straight from the realm of dreams or alien worlds. It rises unexpectedly from the dusty floor of the Black Rock Desert, a steaming, kaleidoscopic mound of mineral and life called the Fly Geyser. Though relatively unknown to many travelers, those who encounter it are left spellbound by its surreal form. A fantastical structure of spouting water and rainbow-colored terraces, sculpted not by eons of geological time but largely by accident and mere decades of flow. It is a place where mistake meets miracle, and where nature, once given a little nudge, has created something entirely otherworldly. The story of Fly Geyser begins not with ancient volcanic activity or tectonic upheaval, but with a simple human endeavor. In 1916, a well was drilled on a private ranch near the edge of Fly Reservoir in search of irrigation water. What they struck, however, was not a cold aquifer but a pocket of geothermally heated water that emerged from the earth at near-boiling temperatures. The well was quickly capped, its utility for agriculture deemed useless. But nature was not finished. Decades later, in 1964, a second well was drilled nearby in another attempt to tap the groundwater. Once again, geothermal water surged forth, rich in dissolved minerals. This time, the well was not properly sealed. Over time, pressurized water began to escape through fissures around the well, initiating a continuous flow that would ultimately give birth to Fly Geyser as we know it today. What began as a minor leak has, over the last 60 years, grown into a living geological monument. As the hot water bubbles up from the earth, it brings with it a high concentration of dissolved minerals, primarily calcium carbonate and silica. As these minerals are deposited around the opening, they have slowly built up a series of sinuous mounds and terraces, layer upon layer, like a fantastical, molten cake left to harden in the sun. The central cone has grown to stand over 12 feet tall, its jagged, bulbous form resembling a melting coral reef or an organic alien spire. Around it, the water flows down in thin rivulets, etching channels through the mineral surface and feeding shallow pools that shimmer with hues almost too vivid to believe. The colors, oh, the colors. Fly Geyser is wrapped in a living coat of greens, reds, yellows, and oranges, not painted, but grown. These brilliant hues are the work of thermophilic algae and bacteria, microorganisms that thrive in the hot, mineral-rich waters. Each type of microbe favors a different temperature and chemical composition, forming distinct color zones. Near the hottest parts of the geyser, bright yellow and gold dominate, thanks to sulfur-loving bacteria. Farther out, where the water cools slightly, brilliant reds and deep emerald greens emerge. The result is a geothermal canvas, a living painting constantly evolving with flow, temperature, and microbial balance. From a distance, especially under the harsh midday sun or the soft light of dawn, the geyser looks entirely unreal. The steam rising from the mound adds a ghostly aura, while the surrounding pools reflect the sky in shimmering, metallic blues and greens. The entire formation seems almost animate, as if it breathes, pulses, and reacts to the world around it. On windless days, the steam rises in perfect spirals. On colder mornings, it drifts in curtains, cloaking the geyser in shifting veils. Visitors have described it as the earth dreaming, a dragon's mouth, or simply a miracle nobody meant to make. Though Fly Geyser is not as tall or forceful as some of the world's great geysers, like Old Faithful in Yellowstone, its surreal beauty and rare origin make it arguably more fascinating. It doesn't erupt in spectacular bursts. Rather, it flows continuously, creating an ever-growing, ever-changing sculpture. Over time, several smaller geysers have formed nearby, fed by the same geothermal system. These siblings of the main geyser dot the area, with smaller cones and steaming vents, contributing to the alien appearance of the whole site. The surrounding landscape, stark and flat, only amplifies the geyser's strangeness. Out here in the Black Rock Desert, where little else grows and where dust and silence reign supreme, Fly Geyser glows with life and color like a secret kept too long underground. For decades, Fly Geyser remained largely hidden from public view. It sat on private land, part of a ranch property owned by Fly Ranch, and was rarely accessible to outsiders. The lack of exposure only deepened its mythos, whispered about in geology circles, coveted by photographers, and hunted by curious wanderers. But in recent years, thanks to efforts by environmental organizations like the Burning Man Project, which now owns the land, limited and guided access to the site has become available. These visits are strictly controlled to protect the fragile ecosystem, and rightly so. The geyser, though resilient in its own way, is still a delicate balance of temperature, biology, and mineral flow. Even a few careless footsteps could damage the microbial mats or disturb the natural patterns of water flow. Part of what makes Fly Geyser so evocative is its symbolism. It embodies a perfect paradox. It was born from error, yet it became beautiful. It is artificial in origin, yet entirely natural in its current form. It is a landscape that should not exist and yet thrives, constantly reshaping itself and pushing against the boundaries of our expectations. It speaks to the unpredictable power of nature, the unintentional consequences of human interference, and the hidden artistry that bubbles just beneath the surface of our planet. Moreover, it belongs to a rare class of places on Earth, places that look more like digital fabrications or CGI backdrops than actual, physical locations. When people see photographs of Fly Geyser, many assume it's been manipulated or enhanced. But those who stand before it in person quickly realize that no digital effect can replicate the shimmer of mineral-laced water, the softness of steam drifting through desert air, or the impossible richness of color created by sun and microbe and stone. It is, in every sense, a phenomenon that must be experienced to be believed. Fly Geyser is not grand in scale, but it is enormous in impact. It does not roar, but it speaks, in color, in steam, in shimmer. It is a portal into the Earth's hidden beauty, unlocked by chance and preserved by wonder. In a world where most landscapes are categorized, named, and understood, this Technicolor fountain in the desert remains defiantly unique, quietly burning, quietly growing, a vivid mistake turned masterpiece. On the edge of the Vatnajökull National Park in southeast Iceland, where Europe's largest glacier meets the ocean's hunger, lies a place so stark and unspoiled, so otherworldly in its stillness and shimmer, that it feels more dreamt than discovered. This is Jökulsárlón Glacier Lagoon, an ethereal expanse of ice-choked water cradled by volcanic shores and the ever-creeping arms of a glacial giant. Here, massive blocks of ancient, electric blue ice break off from the Breiðamerkurjökull Glacier and drift solemnly toward the North Atlantic, transforming the lagoon into a moving gallery of frozen sculptures. With each passing hour, each change in light, and each soft groan of shifting ice, Jökulsárlón reshapes its beauty, offering something new, something untamed, something primordial. This surreal lagoon didn't always exist. In fact, it is one of the youngest major natural wonders in Iceland, a living symbol of a changing Earth. Formed around the mid-20th century, Jökulsárlón is the direct result of glacial retreat. As the Breiðamerkurjökull Glacier, an outlet of the mighty Vatnajökull ice cap, began to melt and pull back, it left behind a depression. That filled with meltwater. Icebergs carved from the glacier's face began to collect in the newly formed lake, and thus, the lagoon was born. Over the decades, the lake has grown dramatically in size, now covering nearly 18 square kilometers, swallowing the land that once stood firm and cold beneath it. Where green moss and volcanic sand once met glacial ice, water now reigns, deep and dark, with depths reaching up to 248 meters, making it the deepest lake in Iceland. At first glance, Jökulsárlón appears as a silent graveyard of ice, a realm suspended in time. But the lagoon is anything but still. It is alive with motion, slow, imperceptible to the impatient eye, but relentless. Enormous icebergs, some the size of small buildings, break off from the glacier's snout and tumble into the lagoon with thunderous splashes, sending ripples across the glassy surface. Once afloat, they begin their silent drift toward the sea, moved by tides and wind. Along the way, they collide, split, flip, and dissolve, groaning with the weight of millennia. Their surfaces, sculpted by weather and time, form jagged peaks, smooth flanks, delicate arches, and improbable angles, a frozen parade of natural artistry. The color of the ice is a spectacle unto itself. While some bergs are milky white or gray with ash from past volcanic eruptions, others glow with an uncanny shade of electric blue. This hue is not the result of dye or trickery, but of physics and time. Glacial ice that has been compressed over centuries loses its air bubbles and becomes densely packed. This dense ice absorbs all colors of the light spectrum except blue, which it reflects with mesmerizing clarity. The result is chunks of ice that seem to glow from within, like captured fragments of the sky or echoes of ancient polar nights. On overcast days, the blues appear almost neon. Under the midnight sun, they pulse gently like frozen lanterns adrift on cold waters. But the lagoon's magic doesn't end at the water's edge. Just across from the main viewing areas, the icebergs that have made it to the mouth of the lagoon wash out to sea, and some are pushed back ashore by waves. This creates a phenomenon known as Diamond Beach, where glittering chunks of ice rest on a stretch of black volcanic sand. The contrast is visually staggering. Crystalline ice, fractured and smooth, sparkling in the sun like cut glass, lying against the inky canvas of basaltic grains. The beach changes by the hour, depending on tides and the movement of ice, always reshaping itself. Some days, it's littered with giant ice sculptures. Other days, it's nearly bare, the ice having melted or floated away, only to return with the tide in a different form. Jökulsárlón is also a sanctuary for life, a reminder that even in the coldest, starkest places, the pulse of nature persists. Seals are frequently seen bobbing between the bergs, poking their slick heads above water, or lounging lazily on floating slabs of ice. Arctic terns and skuas dart through the sky, diving to catch fish or chasing each other in acrobatic displays. During the summer months, the surrounding lowlands come alive with birds and mosses, while the distant mountains remain snow-kissed, painting a scene of eternal contrast. The soundscape of the lagoon is as unforgettable as the view. Stand on its shores, and you'll hear the creaking and cracking of icebergs, the distant rumble of glacier carving, and the eerie groans of melting giants, a kind of glacial symphony that echoes across the stillness. The wind whistles across the open expanse, and when the fog rolls in, it swallows the lagoon in a cold hush, wrapping it in silence so profound it feels spiritual. There's a reverence to the air, as though the lagoon demands not just admiration, but respect, a recognition of the raw, ancient power of nature in flux. Access to Jökulsárlón is surprisingly easy for such a remote-seeming wonder. It lies directly along Iceland's Ring Road, about 5 hours' drive from Reykjavik. Tourists can view the lagoon from the shore or join amphibious boat tours that take them among the floating icebergs, getting so close that you can reach out and touch ice that's thousands of years old. In winter, the entire scene transforms once again. Snow covers the shores, and the ice thickens, while the long nights make it one of the best places in Iceland to view the aurora borealis. Imagine it, green and violet ribbons dancing above a lagoon of glowing blue ice, the stars scattered like frost across the sky. It is a vision that borders on the supernatural. But even as Jökulsárlón seduces the imagination, it also speaks to a deeper truth. It is a place born of retreat, of melting, of the slow unraveling of a glacier that once stretched farther, wider, deeper. It is a reminder that beauty and loss often go hand in hand. Climate change continues to accelerate the retreat of Breiðamerkurjökull, and while the lagoon continues to grow, the glacier that feeds it diminishes year by year. In this way, the lagoon is both a gift and a warning, a fleeting jewel carved by forces that now shift ever more rapidly. It is a place to marvel at, certainly, but also to reflect upon what it means to witness nature in transition, and what responsibility we bear to protect what still remains. Jökulsárlón is not merely a location, it is an experience of time itself. In the floating silence of its waters, you can feel the slow breath of the earth, icy, immense, and inexorably moving. It is the kind of place that makes you still, that quiets the mind and sharpens the senses. And when you leave it, something lingers, the glint of light on ice, the low moan of water against berg, the sense of having stood at the edge of something ancient and unknowable. In the heart of the Philippine island of Bohol, far from the clamor of the world's grand cities and technological centers, rises one of the planet's most enigmatic and symmetrical natural marvels, the Chocolate Hills. Spanning an area of over 50 square kilometers across the municipalities of Carmen, Batuan, and Sagbayan, this surreal landscape features over 1,200, and possibly as many as 1,700, perfectly cone-shaped hills that rise like ancient, earthen sentinels from the rolling green plains. At first glance, they appear man-made, almost too precise, too uniform in size and shape to be the product of nature. But this seemingly artificial terrain is entirely natural, sculpted by time, weather, and the Earth's quiet geological stirrings. What makes the Chocolate Hills so visually arresting isn't just their unusual form, it's their transformation. During the wet season, the hills are blanketed in lush green grass, softening their outlines and lending the landscape a gentle pastoral beauty. But as the dry season settles in, particularly from late December through May, the grasses dry out and wither into a crisp, chocolate-brown hue, giving the hills their famous name. Against the pale blue Philippine sky and the surrounding rice fields and coconut palms, the darkened hills resemble vast mounds of cocoa powder or scoops of chocolate ice cream melting under the tropical sun. It is a spectacle that shifts with the seasons, and those who witness both versions often describe the landscape as two entirely different worlds, one vibrant and lively, the other muted and surreal. The uniformity of these hills is extraordinary. Most of them stand between 30 to 50 meters high, though some reach up to 120 meters, and each one shares a similarly rounded, almost geometric shape. There are no jagged peaks, no rough ridges, just smooth, dome-like humps that ripple across the land like the backs of a buried herd of giants. From aerial views, they look like an undulating green and brown quilt, a rhythmic rise and fall that seems to follow an ancient, forgotten pattern. The scientific explanation behind the formation of the Chocolate Hills is as intriguing as the landscape itself. Geologists believe that these hills are the result of millions of years of weathering of marine limestone that was uplifted from the ocean floor during tectonic shifts. This limestone, once part of a coral reef system beneath the sea, was pushed above ground as the Philippine archipelago formed. Over the ages, rainwater, slightly acidic due to carbon dioxide absorption, seeped into the porous rock, carving out cracks and fissures and slowly eroding the softer material. As erosion wore away the limestone between the harder portions, What was left behind were these hundreds of uniform, rounded mounds. Some theories also point to the influence of karst topography, the same geological process responsible for limestone formations like sinkholes and caves, as a key sculptor of this unique terrain. But beyond geology, the Chocolate Hills are steeped in folklore and legend, as one might expect of a place so strange and beautiful. According to one popular Visayan myth, the hills were formed from the tears of a giant named Orogo, who fell in love with a mortal woman. When she died, his sorrow was so immense that his tears turned into stone, forming the hills. Another version tells of two giants who hurled boulders and earth at each other during a titanic battle. After days of fighting, they grew tired and made peace, but left behind the scattered debris of their war, which became the Chocolate Hills. Some local stories even suggest that the hills are petrified excrement from a colossal carabao, water buffalo, that gorged itself on spoiled crops and left behind this hilly mess, a more humorous take on natural history. Regardless of origin, the Chocolate Hills have long held cultural significance. They are deeply rooted in the identity of Baholonos and are featured prominently on the official seal of the province. In 1988, the Philippine government declared the area a National Geological Monument, recognizing it as one of the country's most important natural features and protecting it from development or excessive tourism exploitation. This protection has helped preserve the hills in their pristine state, ensuring that visitors today see the same strange beauty that has mesmerized generations of Filipinos. Tourism infrastructure has been thoughtfully developed around the hills, with care taken to minimize environmental impact. The most popular viewing site is in Carmen, where a dedicated Chocolate Hills complex offers panoramic platforms that allow visitors to take in the stunning symmetry of the landscape from an elevated vantage point. There is also the Sagbayan Peak, which offers another less crowded but equally breathtaking view, particularly at sunrise and sunset, when the shifting light casts long, dramatic shadows across the mounds and highlights their texture and depth. During golden hour, the Chocolate Hills take on an almost liquid quality, as if they were poured from a great ladle of earth and hardened in place. Those who venture closer to the base of the hills, trekking among them by foot or bike, discover another kind of magic. The mounds are surrounded by dense vegetation, rice paddies, and groves of coconut trees. Narrow paths snake between them, and small local communities live quietly in the folds of the terrain, farming the rich volcanic soil and drawing water from underground springs. The area feels untouched by modernity, wrapped in a timeless calm that mirrors the ancient slowness with which these hills were born. Birdsong mingles with the rustle of grass, and the occasional butterfly flits between wildflowers, offering moments of serene stillness against a backdrop of geological grandeur. The Chocolate Hills are not just a tourist attraction, they are a symbol of resilience, both natural and human. They have withstood earthquakes, including a powerful one in 2013 that damaged some of the tourist infrastructure, typhoons, and the passage of centuries, yet remain almost eerily unchanging. Their repetitive perfection seems to defy chaos, standing as a testament to the patient artistry of natural forces. And they remind us that the Earth's greatest masterpieces often emerge not from violence or speed, but from steady, persistent transformation. In an age when so much of the planet has been paved, mined, or molded by human hands, places like the Chocolate Hills feel like sacred relics of a more elemental world, places that are not just seen, but felt. To walk among them is to sense the deep pulse of the earth beneath your feet, to step into a landscape that feels both impossibly precise and gently chaotic. Whether viewed from afar or explored up close, the Chocolate Hills offer something rare, a geography that seems to speak in riddles, in myths, in soft whispers of geological time. And when the dry season comes, when the grass has crisped into shades of mahogany and ochre, and the air carries the sweet scent of sun-baked earth, the hills live up to their name. They stretch toward the horizon like an endless box of chocolates, mysterious and inviting, and utterly unlike anywhere else on Earth. Hidden in the quiet woodlands of West Pomerania, near the town of Gryfino in northwestern Poland, lies one of the world's most peculiar and hauntingly beautiful natural anomalies, the Crooked Forest, or Kazwy Las in Polish. At first glance, it looks like a place conjured from folklore, a dreamscape that bends the rules of both nature and symmetry. Around 400 pine trees, all planted in the 1930s, grow not upward in the typical skyward stretch we associate with forests, but rather in elegant, eerie arcs that curve sharply at their base before rising straight again like shepherd's crooks or question marks etched in bark. What makes the Crooked Forest so fascinating is not just the shape of the trees. It's the mystery that clings to their formation like morning fog. Each tree curves in almost identical fashion, a smooth 90-degree bend toward the north near the base, then an upward sweep as if eventually remembering its original purpose of reaching for the sun. The curves begin just a few inches above the ground, and the bent sections are thick and muscular, as though caught in motion or mid-transformation. Some appear to lean on invisible winds, others look as though they are quietly bowing. No other trees in the surrounding woods, which are largely composed of naturally upright pines, show any sign of this curvature. The crooked trees are confined to a small, roughly 1.7-hectare grove, making the effect even more isolated and uncanny, as if something specific and unrepeatable happened right there, and nowhere else. To date, no universally accepted explanation exists for the crooked forest's strange design. And that uncertainty has only deepened the allure of the place, drawing in travelers, scientists, and artists from around the world. Some speculate that the trees were deliberately manipulated by human hands, possibly by local foresters or craftsmen who wanted curved timber for specialized purposes like furniture making, shipbuilding, or sled runners. By intentionally bending the saplings when they were just a few years old, they could have trained the trees into these shapes with ropes, weights, or careful cuts. However, for such a labor-intensive task, no records, blueprints, or oral histories remain to confirm it, and the idea that such a project would be undertaken without any surviving documentation seems unlikely to some scholars. Others have suggested natural phenomena. Perhaps a heavy snowfall during the tree's early growth years pushed them over en masse, and they continued to grow in their now curved forms once the snow melted. But this fails to explain the consistency of the curvature, why they all bend in the same direction, at the same height, with the same graceful arc. Wind, too, has been dismissed, as prevailing winds strong enough to deform trees usually leave a more chaotic, uneven pattern and affect all surrounding vegetation. In this case, the crooked forest stands like an island of the strange amid a sea of straightness. More esoteric theories abound. Some claim gravitational anomalies or magnetic field disruptions, perhaps linked to underground mineral deposits or old meteor impacts, might be warping the tree's growth patterns. Though there's no hard scientific evidence to support this, the idea persists in part because it offers a romantic, otherworldly answer to a puzzle that resists easy classification. Others, venturing further into the realm of the mystical, suggest the area might be a geomantic hotspot, a place where energies align in ways we don't yet understand, akin to Stonehenge or the Bermuda Triangle, but cloaked in forest hush. Still others invoke wartime disturbance. Given that the region was heavily impacted by World War II, some theorists believe military activity might have had a role. Perhaps tanks or equipment damaged young trees, or bomb craters forced them to grow in odd patterns. But again, this doesn't explain the precision and uniformity of the curvature, which seems more deliberate than chaotic. Regardless of how they came to be, what's undeniable is the emotional power of the crooked forest. Visitors describe an almost spiritual stillness there, a sense that time moves differently, that the trees themselves are frozen in mid-gesture. On overcast days, the forest feels melancholic, like a forgotten monument. When fog descends, it becomes a dreamscape of shifting lines and disappearing paths. On sunny afternoons, light dances through the canopy and accentuates the soft geometry of the curves, as if the forest were exhaling in slow motion. The crooked trees have become a symbol of poetic resistance, a visual metaphor for how life can bend under pressure and still rise, how beauty can emerge from deformation. They've inspired painters, sculptors, photographers, and poets, all trying to capture what makes this small grove so otherworldly. Some describe it as a natural cathedral, others as a green museum where gravity takes a backseat to imagination. From a tourism perspective, the crooked forest has slowly grown in international attention, especially in the age of Instagram and viral travel content. Yet despite this, the site remains relatively unspoiled, partially because of its remote location and partially because the Polish government has taken a cautious approach to development. There are no ticket booths or giant souvenir shops. Instead, visitors often find themselves walking a quiet trail, where the trees appear with little fanfare but immense presence, like dancers caught mid-performance in a forgotten choreography. Some environmentalists worry about the grove's future. Since the trees are now nearly a century old, and because they were likely planted and maintained through human effort, even if the purpose is unknown, there's concern that once these original trees die, the crooked forest may not regenerate in the same shape, unless active efforts are made to replicate the conditions or techniques that cause the bends. And with Poland's growing focus on sustainable tourism and environmental conservation, discussions are underway about how best to preserve the site while respecting its strange, silent history. Whether they are the result of human intention, natural anomaly, or some long-lost tradition, the trees of the Crooked Forest stand today as living question marks, a quiet mystery rooted in the soil, inviting every visitor to bring their own interpretation. In an age where so much is explained and categorized, the forest offers a rare gift: wonder without resolution, beauty without logic. As the wind rustles through their crooked trunks and pine needles fall gently to the forest floor, the trees seem to whisper stories we no longer understand, of hands that shaped them or forces that guided them, of storms or ideas, of art or accident. And maybe, in the end, that's the true magic of the Crooked Forest. Not that it bends the trees, but that it bends the mind. In the heart of one of Earth's most remote and unforgiving landscapes, where glaciers stretch endlessly across a white desert and temperatures can plummet to unspeakable lows, there exists a surreal phenomenon that seems to defy both geography and expectation: a crimson cascade bleeding from a wall of ice, known as Blood Falls. Located in Antarctica's McMurdo Dry Valleys, more specifically at the snout of the Taylor Glacier, Blood Falls is a spectacle so haunting and out of place that early explorers thought they were witnessing something out of science fiction. A brilliant, rusty-red stream gushes intermittently from a fissure in the glacier, staining the surrounding white ice with hues of maroon and scarlet, like an open wound in the very body of the continent. The sight is visceral and shocking, a waterfall not of clear or blue meltwater, but of deep, metallic red fluid, as if the glacier were hemorrhaging blood. This visual horror miracle has inspired countless myths, theories, and scientific investigations since its discovery in 1911 by Australian geologist Griffith Taylor, after whom the glacier is named. At the time, the phenomenon was baffling. With little understanding of the underlying chemistry, many assumed red algae might be responsible, similar to blooms seen in other ice-rich environments. But as technology advanced and researchers returned again and again to the site, the true, and far more fascinating, explanation gradually came to light. Blood Falls is not the result of algae or any biological pigment. Its color comes from oxidized iron in hypersaline water trapped deep beneath the glacier for millions of years. Imagine an ancient subglacial lake sealed off from the atmosphere for eons, a dark, anoxic world where life persisted in utter isolation and cold. This brine is rich in ferrous iron, Fe², and as it slowly seeps out through cracks in the glacier and meets the air for the first time in geological timescales, the iron oxidizes, much like a cut apple turning brown or iron rusting in air, transforming into ferric iron, Fe3, and turning the water a vivid blood red. The water that feeds Blood Falls is unique in more ways than color. It is extremely salty, even saltier than seawater, which allows it to remain in a liquid state despite the freezing temperatures of the Antarctic environment. This salinity, combined with pressure and the insulation of overlying ice, preserves a briny, iron-rich reservoir that pulses through the glacier with glacial slowness. It is not a constant waterfall but more of an intermittent outflow, sometimes trickling and sometimes spewing, depending on internal and external conditions. And with every pulse, it tells a story from a time long before humans, a tale preserved in ice, salt, and iron. What makes Blood Falls especially remarkable is that the ecosystem from which it emerges is believed to be entirely isolated from the outside world. Researchers drilling into the subglacial reservoir have found extremophile microbes, single-celled organisms that survive without sunlight or oxygen, instead relying on chemosynthesis, using iron and sulfate as energy sources. These life forms represent some of the most primitive and resilient organisms on Earth, surviving in complete darkness, sub-zero temperatures, and extreme salinity. They provide tantalizing clues about the potential for life in similar extreme environments beyond Earth, such as the subsurface oceans of Europa or Enceladus, moons of Jupiter and Saturn, respectively. In this way, Blood Falls becomes not just an earthly wonder, but a cosmic one, a potential analogue for extraterrestrial ecosystems. From a geological perspective, the Taylor Glacier and Blood Falls also challenge assumptions about what glaciers are capable of. Far from being static blocks of frozen water, these dynamic structures conceal hidden rivers, brine pockets, and complex networks of flow. They breathe, shift, and release trapped elements from Earth's deep past. Blood Falls is one visible vent of this invisible, ancient complexity, a pressure valve for time-locked chemistry and biology. Visiting Blood Falls in person is nearly impossible for the average traveler. The McMurdo Dry Valleys are among the most extreme deserts on the planet, with some areas receiving less precipitation annually than the Sahara. Paradoxically, these valleys are also ice-free, shielded from snowfall by surrounding mountains and blasted by dry katabatic winds that descend from the Antarctic plateau. The Taylor Glacier sits at the edge of this paradox, a river of ice pouring into a realm of dust and rock, beneath skies that glow with otherworldly clarity. To reach the site, one must join specialized scientific expeditions involving helicopters, snowmobiles, and sophisticated life support gear. Despite the remoteness, the allure of Blood Falls continues to grow. It has become a symbol of hidden life, of beauty born in darkness, of the alien worlds within our own. For scientists, it's a living laboratory. For artists and dreamers, it's a poem written in iron and ice. For those who stumble upon its images, shocking red against pristine white, it is often met with disbelief. Surely, this must be digitally altered? Surely, nature does not spill blood in such dramatic fashion? And yet it does. Not with violence, but with slow, geological elegance. Blood Falls is not violent, it is revealing. It tells of subsurface resilience, of deep time, and of the possibility that life finds a way, even in the most barren corners of our planet. In a world obsessed with the immediate and the visible, Blood Falls reminds us that the greatest mysteries often lie buried and unseen, emerging only in red-tinged trickles. A living wound in Antarctica's ancient face, a scarlet whisper from the underworld, and a pulsing symbol that even the coldest, harshest places may hold warmth, color, and life, waiting to emerge. Perched on the desolate and wind-scoured expanse of Ross Island in Antarctica, where ice meets flame and where silence reigns over white wilderness, there stands one of the most haunting and geologically active places on the planet, Mount Erebus. This is no ordinary mountain. It is Earth's southernmost active volcano, and within its icy grasp rise formations so strange and unworldly they defy simple categorization. Known as the Ice Towers of Mount Erebus, these surreal, chimney-like spires of frozen vapor seem to sprout like ghostly totems across the mountain's flanks, guarding the approach to a lava-filled crater that bubbles relentlessly in one of the most remote corners of the Earth. Mount Erebus, towering at 3,794 meters, 12,448 feet, above the surrounding polar desert, is not only remarkable for being active but also for harboring one of the few persistent lava lakes on the planet. This open lake of molten rock, visible year-round despite the extreme cold, is a rare phenomenon shared only by a handful of volcanoes globally. But beyond this simmering caldera lies a lesser-known wonder, the network of ice fumaroles, sculpted by volcanic heat meeting Antarctic air. The process begins with geothermal steam venting from the mountain's interior, which escapes through cracks and fumaroles scattered across Erebus's icy slopes. When this hot vapor meets the frigid Antarctic atmosphere, where temperatures can plunge to -60 degrees Celsius -76 degrees Fahrenheit, it freezes almost instantly, forming hollow towers of ice that slowly build upward over time, like natural chimneys sculpted by invisible hands. Some towers grow to be 10 to 15 meters tall, 30 to 50 feet, and within them, the steam continues to flow, creating internal passageways, vents, and occasionally even faint hissing noises, as if the mountain were breathing through frozen lungs. The appearance of these structures is eerie and mesmerizing. From a distance, they resemble monolithic white sentinels, clustered in small groups or standing alone against the bleak horizon. Up close, their surfaces are rough with ice crystals, sculpted by wind and temperature changes. Some appear smooth and tubular, while others are gnarled and twisted like the roots of some ancient petrified forest. Inside, the warm steam can create microhabitats, and though the environment is extremely inhospitable to most life, researchers have speculated that thermophilic, heat-loving, microbes may dwell within, drawing energy from chemical processes near the fumaroles. For scientists, Mount Erebus and its ice towers offer more than spectacle. They provide a living laboratory to study extremophile ecosystems, geothermal processes, and analogues to extraterrestrial conditions. The Erebus ice towers have often been compared to environments we might one day encounter on Mars or the moons of Jupiter and Saturn. In fact, scientists from NASA and other space agencies have used Erebus as a training ground for astrobiological fieldwork, imagining that similar ice fumarole systems might exist beneath the icy crust of Europa, where volcanic or hydrothermal activity could interact with subsurface oceans. The unique geology of Erebus extends beyond its lava lake and ice towers. The volcano emits unusual volcanic gases, including carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and hydrogen chloride, often in higher concentrations than other stratovolcanoes. The lava itself is phonolitic, a rare type of volcanic rock high in alkali metals. This, combined with the extreme environment, makes Erebus chemically and geologically distinct from most volcanoes on Earth. Visiting Mount Erebus and its ice towers is an endeavor reserved for the boldest scientific expeditions. The site is accessible primarily from McMurdo Station, the largest Antarctic research base, which lies about 35 kilometers, 22 miles, away. Even then, reaching the summit or venturing near the ice towers requires specialized gear, helicopter transport, and full survival training. The air is thin, the cold is unforgiving, and the terrain is treacherous with deep crevasses hidden under layers of snow. Yet, despite the dangers, the allure of Erebus continues to draw volcanologists, glaciologists, microbiologists, and explorers. There's a stark beauty to the mountain, a place where fire burns beneath miles of ice, where clouds of steam dance like spirits around frozen chimneys, and where the elements combine in the most unlikely marriage of opposites. The ice towers are a physical manifestation of this paradox, delicate and ephemeral, yet born from the heart of a relentless, ancient force. They do not last forever. As the steam path changes or the outer shell thickens too much, the towers can collapse or be buried by snowfall, only to reform elsewhere as Erebus shifts and exhales in new directions. And so, in the land of silence and cold, Erebus speaks in plumes of vapor and towers of ice, whispering to those few who dare approach that the world still holds secrets, still holds alien marvels, and still hides wonders that defy our expectations of what life, geology, and beauty can be. It is a place where time seems frozen, yet within that frost, energy pulses, quietly building surreal cathedrals of steam and snow. Tucked deep within the Atacama Desert, the driest non-polar desert on Earth, lies a place so stark, so eerily still, and so geologically uncanny that it often feels more like a fragment of another world than a corner of Chile. Known as the Valley of the Moon, or Valle de la Luna, this mesmerizing expanse sits just west of the town of San Pedro de Atacama, nestled between rugged Andean highlands and the vast Salar de Atacama salt flats. Its name is no hyperbole. This land appears sculpted not by familiar winds and waters, but by the slow hand of cosmic forces, its barren, wind-carved terrain echoing the surface of the Moon or even Mars. The Valley of the Moon's surreal appearance is a result of millions of years of intense geological folding, volcanic eruptions, and salt erosion. Over eons, the tectonic collision between the South American and Nazca plates created immense pressure underground, forcing layers of sedimentary rock to ripple upward and form jagged ridges and valleys. These formations were then scoured by brutal desert winds and flash floods that, though rare, carve the surface with knife-like precision. The result is a landscape composed of sharp crests, vast sand dunes, deep gorges, and glittering salt-encrusted plains, a textured tapestry of light and shadow. The colors of the valley shift subtly throughout the day. At sunrise, the terrain appears pale and chalky, almost ghost-like under the rising sun. As the day progresses, the sun illuminates layers of crimson, copper, orange, and lavender in the rocky outcrops. But it's at sunset that Valle de la Luna earns its reputation as a celestial twin. As the light dips toward the horizon, the landscape seems to glow from within, drenched in hues so vivid they feel digitally enhanced. Deep purples bleeding into flaming reds and golds, the salt crystals catching the last light and twinkling like stardust across the surface. This fleeting blaze of color vanishes into icy darkness, leaving behind the utter stillness of the desert night, broken only by the whisper of wind. One of the valley's most defining features is its salt caves and crusted salt flats. These glisten in the harsh sunlight and crunch underfoot like brittle glass. Entire cliff faces are sheathed in thick layers of salt, some of which crackle and expand audibly as temperatures shift throughout the day. These natural sounds give the landscape an eerie, otherworldly soundtrack, as though the valley itself is breathing or whispering secrets through the crevices. Then there are the sand dunes, vast and sinuous, sculpted by the relentless wind into ridgelines that stretch like frozen waves across the valley floor. The most famous is the Duna Maya, a colossal dune often climbed by visitors for an unobstructed panorama of the valley below. From its peak, the view is profound, a panoramic vision of cracked, jagged terrain interspersed with sweeping golden sands, the snow-dusted peaks of the Andes framing the horizon. To stand atop this dune at dusk is to feel like an interstellar traveler, gazing across a foreign planet. The Rock of the Three Marys, Las Tres Marias, is another iconic landmark within Valle de la Luna. These three oddly shaped rock formations, huddled together in the salt plains, have been sculpted into their current shapes by wind erosion. Though their silhouettes are fragile and abstract, they resemble three figures in reverent posture, a haunting image of nature's ability to mimic life through pure chance. The Valley of the Moon is also home to a geological phenomenon called desert varnish, where minerals from the atmosphere and rain mix with microbial life on rock surfaces, creating dark streaks or coatings that look almost like brushstrokes. These streaks add yet another layer of texture to an already richly tactile landscape, and further enforce the sensation of walking through a painted dreamscape. Despite its barren appearance, the valley is a beacon for scientific inquiry, particularly in the field of astrobiology. NASA and other space agencies have used this location as a training and testing site for Mars exploration missions. The Atacama's hyper-aridity, parts of the desert have gone centuries without measurable rainfall, combined with high solar radiation and salty soils, makes it a close analogue to conditions on the Red Planet. Instruments and robotic rovers designed to search for life or perform geological surveys on Mars are often tested here, and scientists study how extremophiles, microbes that survive in harsh environments, manage to persist in the Atacama as a blueprint for potential life beyond Earth. The human history of the region is no less fascinating. Long before scientists and space agencies arrived, the Atacamino people, indigenous inhabitants of the area, lived in this desert for thousands of years, surviving through an intricate knowledge of the terrain and its seasonal rhythms. They left behind stone tools, petroglyphs, and ancient roads, evidence of an enduring culture that carved out life in one of the world's most unforgiving climates. Today, the descendants of these people continue to live in the surrounding towns, integrating traditional knowledge with modern life, and guiding visitors through the secrets of the desert. At night, Valle de la Luna undergoes a final transformation. As the last colors of dusk fade, darkness settles quickly, unimpeded by any city lights. The night sky here is among the clearest on Earth. The high altitude, dry air, and lack of light pollution make it ideal for stargazing. The Milky Way cuts a luminous swath across the heavens, stars sparkle with razor-sharp clarity, and planets hang in the sky like lanterns. It is not unusual to spot satellites tracing their quiet orbits or witness meteors streaking across the darkness. The silence is total, the isolation complete, and the immensity of both the land and sky leaves visitors awed, humbled, and permanently altered. To walk through Valle de la Luna is to journey not just across terrain, but through deep time, elemental power, and the very edge of what it means to be terrestrial. It is a place where Earth masquerades as another planet, where rock and salt and sky combine to create a sensory experience that can't quite be explained, only felt. In a world where few wild places remain untouched, Valle de la Luna remains defiantly unyielding, eternally strange, and exquisitely unreal. Deep in the rugged, rain-soaked interior of Dominica, the Caribbean's nature island, lies a sight so fierce and elemental that it feels almost mythological: the Boiling Lake. This vast, bubbling cauldron of grey-blue water, ringed by jagged cliffs and perpetually veiled in rising clouds of steam, is not only a wonder of natural science, but a place that tests the limits of human endurance and curiosity. Shrouded in mist, exhaling sulfur, and constantly roiling from subterranean heat, the Boiling Lake is one of the largest actively boiling lakes in the world, and among the most unreal landscapes found anywhere on the planet. To reach the lake, there is no shortcut. Visitors must trek through Montrois Pitons National Park, a UNESCO World Heritage Site that encapsulates Dominica's raw, volcanic essence. The journey takes approximately 6 to 8 hours round trip, traversing dense rainforest, narrow ridgelines, and geothermal valleys, passing waterfalls and fumaroles, all under the rhythm of birdsong and the occasional clap of thunder. The final ascent to the Boiling Lake cuts through the Valley of Desolation, a geologically active wasteland of sulfur vents, boiling mudpots, and steaming rivers, where the earth seems alive and hostile beneath your boots. Then, through the haze, the lake appears. About 200 feet across, the Boiling Lake lies cradled in a collapsed fumarole, a volcanic vent where superheated gases escape from deep within the earth. The surface is a turbulent, ever-shifting expanse of greyish water, often hidden beneath rolling banks of white steam that rise endlessly from its superheated depths. The water's temperature at the edges has been measured between 80 degrees Celsius and 90 degrees Celsius, 176 degrees Fahrenheit to 194 degrees Fahrenheit, while the center, too hot to safely access, is presumed to be at or near boiling point, possibly superheated by gases like hydrogen sulfide and carbon dioxide bubbling up from a magma chamber below. The entire scene resembles a vision from ancient folklore, a simmering lake of elemental chaos, walled in by cliffs streaked with minerals and stained by centuries of volcanic activity. The air is thick with the smell of sulfur and minerals. The rocks underfoot are hot to the touch. The soundscape is haunting, a mix of deep gurgles, low rumbles, hissing steam vents, and the dull roar of constantly shifting water. It's not merely hot, it's primeval, a sensory encounter with Earth's restless inner soul. Geologists believe the boiling lake is kept in its active, boiling state by a combination of volcanic heat and a continuous inflow of rainwater and groundwater. These waters seep down through fissures in the earth, meet the magma-heated rocks below, then rise again as steam-laced, boiling water. When the balance of this inflow is disrupted, due to a landslide, heavy rainfall, or seismic activity, the lake has been known to drain partially, exposing the churning crater bed before refilling and resuming its furious boil. This dramatic fluctuation was recorded most notably in 1880, when the lake temporarily dropped to just a few bubbling pools before returning to full capacity. The lake is dynamic and volatile, a living thermal gauge of the island's volcanic heartbeat. Local folklore has long surrounded the boiling lake with mystery and reverence. In the pre-Columbian era, the Kalinago people, Dominica's indigenous inhabitants, believed the lake was a sacred gateway between worlds, a place where the spirits of the earth conversed with the sky. Even today, there's a sense of respect and fear surrounding the site. Unlike other geothermal areas where tourism may lead to commercialization, Dominica has kept the boiling lake wild, remote, and relatively untouched, maintaining its reputation as one of the Caribbean's last true wilderness experiences. There are no fences, no safety rails, no gift shops, just raw nature. Standing near the edge, the ground trembling faintly beneath your feet and the steam swirling like ghosts in the sky, one gets the sense that you are not just observing nature, you're being observed by it. Beyond its dramatic spectacle, the lake and its surroundings are an ecological treasure. The adjacent rainforests are home to hundreds of endemic plant species, exotic orchids, mosses, and ferns, as well as the Ciceroo parrot, Dominica's national bird and one of the rarest in the world. Rivers nearby are tinted yellow and green from mineral deposits, and the very air, although pungent, is saturated with ions from volcanic gases that create a strangely invigorating atmosphere. Tiny thermophilic organisms survive in pools nearby, clinging to life in places where most other creatures would perish, reminders of the adaptability and tenacity of life on this volatile Earth. Yet, perhaps more than anything, what makes the boiling lake so unreal is its sheer inaccessibility and unpredictability. In an age where so much of the planet is documented, charted, and commercialized, Dominica's boiling lake remains a place that defies control. You do not visit it on a whim. You earn it. You hike for hours through rain and mud, through steaming crevices and across precarious ridges, until finally you reach the brink of a place that feels like the world's molten core exposed. And then, standing before it, soaked in humidity, blinking through sulfur clouds, your breath catches, not from exhaustion, but from awe. It's a reminder that the Earth is not finished shaping itself, that beneath the forests and oceans and cities we call home, there is still a boiling, primal engine at work, whispering to those willing to listen. The boiling lake of Dominica is one of those whispers, loud, hot, unrelenting, and utterly unforgettable. Off the rugged west coast of Scotland, where the icy waters of the Atlantic crash against dramatic cliffs and winds howl across the Hebrides, there lies a tiny, uninhabited island cloaked in volcanic mystery, Staffa. At first glance, the island appears like a shard of some ancient world, a small, wind-swept outcrop rising from the sea, bristling with angular, geometric rock formations. But its crown jewel lies on its southern edge, carved into the very bones of the island. This is Fingal's Cave, a cathedral of stone, a natural sea cave unlike any other, defined by its perfectly hexagonal basalt columns and its otherworldly acoustics, where the ocean's voice becomes a symphony of echoes that has stirred imaginations for centuries. Fingal's Cave is part of a greater geological formation born from ancient fire, a volcanic eruption over 60 million years ago, when molten lava flowed and cooled at just the right pace to form columnar basalt, a crystalline pattern that often results in six-sided rock columns. It's the same rare structure found in the famous Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland, which is, in fact, geologically connected to Staffa across the seabed. The slow cooling of lava allowed molecules to arrange themselves in an incredibly ordered way, creating a honeycomb of vertical stone pillars, each one roughly symmetrical, standing shoulder to shoulder as if hand-sculpted by a giant artisan. Nowhere is this formation more majestic, more eerie, and more awe-inspiring than in the yawning mouth of Fingal's Cave. The cave itself is about 75 feet high, 270 feet deep, and 40 feet wide, opening directly onto the sea. What makes it feel so supernatural is not only the geometry of the basalt columns, which rise vertically like organ pipes, extending from the cave floor to its high, vaulted ceiling, but the acoustics. As waves surge in and crash against the inner walls, the sound reverberates with a deep, resonant boom, almost melodic, echoing like some primal chant through the stone chambers. This strange, booming music, combined with the rhythmic pulse of the tides and the eerie play of light across wet basalt, creates an experience not merely visual, but sonic and emotional. For centuries, this cave has captivated the hearts and minds of explorers, artists, and poets. It was rediscovered by the modern world in 1772 when naturalist Sir Joseph Banks visited and described it in glowing terms. Ever since, it has become a place of legend. Romantic poets like William Wordsworth and John Keats spoke of its mysterious grandeur. Jules Verne, in Journey to the Center of the Earth, hinted at a world that mirrored the sublime terror and beauty of Fingal's Cave. Most famously, the German composer Felix Mendelssohn visited in 1829 and was so inspired by the cave's natural acoustics and haunting atmosphere that he composed the Hebrides Overture, also known as Fingal's Cave, a piece that still evokes the crashing waves and solemn tones of the cave itself. The music is as brooding and majestic as the cave, a symphonic poem echoing the stormy romance of the Scottish Sea. The name Fingal itself comes from legend, an anglicisation of the Gaelic Fionn mac Cumaill, or Finn mac Cool, the giant of Irish mythology. Legend has it that Fingal's Cave and the Giant's Causeway across the sea were once connected by a massive stone bridge, built by giants who roamed the British Isles. According to one tale, Finn built the causeway to confront a Scottish rival, only to retreat when he realised the other giant was even larger. His wife, Unar, disguised Finn as a baby, and when the Scottish giant saw the size of the infant, he fled, assuming the father must be monstrous. The story, of course, is mythical, but the geological resemblance between Fingal's Cave and the Giant's Causeway gives it an uncanny foundation, like myth and science overlapping in solid stone. Reaching Fingal's Cave is not straightforward. The cave can only be approached by boat, typically departing from the Isle of Mull or Oban on the Scottish mainland. The journey itself is an adventure, crossing open waters that can quickly turn rough, past other Hebridean islands dotted with puffins, seals, and seabirds wheeling in the wind. As the boat nears Staffa, the cave comes into view, a gaping maw in the cliffs, rimmed with dark stone teeth, casting reflections on the water so sharp and symmetrical they seem man-made. When the tide is low and the sea calm, visitors can disembark and walk along the natural basalt causeway that leads right to the mouth of the cave. The stone columns underfoot form a rugged but navigable path, wet and gleaming with salt spray. Inside the cave, the atmosphere is almost sacred. Light filters in only from the entrance, flickering on the water like the stained glass of a cathedral window. The air is cool and damp, thick with the scent of salt and mineral. The sound of each wave rolling in builds a low roar that wraps around the stone walls, echoes once, then vanishes into the shadowed interior. It's easy to understand why this place feels like a temple of nature, an untouched, unmodified marvel that needs no decoration. It is raw architecture, carved by volcanic force and shaped by a million tides. It's not only a place to witness but to feel, an acoustic, spatial, and visual wonder all at once. Fingal's Cave is not just a geological formation or a tourist attraction. It is a natural symphony, a living myth, and a portal into the timeless artistry of nature. It stands as proof that Earth's greatest creations require no design beyond the slow, patient work of pressure, heat, and time, and that, sometimes, the most surreal beauty comes not from the heavens above, but from the depths of ancient fire, cooled into flawless stone and set to music by the endless, crashing sea. Tucked deep within the mountainous heart of China's Yunnan province lies one of the most surreal and jaw-dropping natural spectacles on Earth. Mount Tianzi, a place that defies earthly logic and seems pulled from the dreamscape of a fantasy novel or a faraway alien world. Rising out of the earth in spindly, vertical columns of stone, these limestone and quartzite towers stand like ancient guardians above a sea of mist, piercing the clouds and vanishing into the sky. In every direction, thousands of narrow peaks, weathered, jagged, and impossibly steep, stretch out in a forest of stone, cloaked in shifting fog and dense green vegetation clinging miraculously to the sheer cliff faces. Located in the Zhangjiajie National Forest Park, Mount Qianzi, which means Heaven's Sun Mountain, a name that nods to imperial legend, is part of the larger Wulingyuan Scenic Area, a UNESCO World Heritage Site and one of the most ethereal regions in all of China. It is so otherworldly, in fact, that its natural architecture directly inspired the floating Hallelujah Mountains of Pandora in James Cameron's 2009 film Avatar. After seeing the surreal imagery of Zhangjiajie, Cameron's design team created Airborne islands resembling Qianzi's spires, a testament to how Earth's own beauty can surpass even the most imaginative science fiction. The origin of Qianzi's extraordinary landscape is a tale written over hundreds of millions of years. These vertical formations were formed through a combination of tectonic uplift and millennia of erosion, as softer rock was gradually worn away by wind, rain, and temperature shifts, leaving behind the harder quartzite pillars. Some of these stone towers rise over 1,200 meters, 3,900 feet, above sea level, and they're so thin and tall they almost appear to defy gravity. In many cases, trees grow directly on top of these narrow spires, their roots weaving into the cracks and crevices, creating what looks like bonsai forests balancing delicately on stone toothpicks. The scenery here changes dramatically with the weather and seasons. On a clear summer day, the green-covered peaks seem endless, and sunlight splashes across their narrow ridges in dazzling patterns. But it's during cloudy or misty mornings, which occur frequently due to the region's humid subtropical climate, that Mount Qianzi becomes a place of true magic. Fog fills the valleys between the peaks, leaving the spires emerging from a white void like ancient sentinels guarding a forgotten kingdom. In winter, snowfall dusts the tops of the columns, creating a scene of frosty serenity. Springtime brings bursts of blooming azaleas and mountain orchids. The seasons here don't just color the landscape, they transform it entirely, offering different moods and spectacles throughout the year. Beyond the visual majesty, Mount Qianzi is steeped in myth and folklore. According to local legend, the mountain is named after a man named Xiong Daquan, a farmer of the Tujia ethnic minority who led a successful rebellion against a cruel feudal ruler during the Yuan dynasty. After declaring himself Qianzi, the Son of Heaven, a title traditionally reserved for emperors, he led his forces into the mountain, where he supposedly vanished into the mist, never to be seen again. Today, his story is honored through several names in the area, such as Xiong Daquan's battlefield and Emperor's Pavilion, adding a mystical layer to the already enchanted surroundings. For those who visit, Mount Qianzi is not just a single viewpoint but an expansive region with multiple observation platforms, hiking trails, and scenic rides. Perhaps the most famous experience is the Qianzi Mountain Cable Car, which soars over valleys and peaks, offering a bird's-eye view of the spires. The ride is both thrilling and serene, providing passengers with panoramic views that would be impossible on foot. Another awe-inspiring attraction is the Bailong Elevator, a glass lift built into the side of a cliff that rises over 326 meters, 1,070 feet, holding the record as the tallest outdoor elevator in the world. The sensation of ascending or descending through a vertical sea of mist and stone is unforgettable, a moment that seems almost cinematic in its surrealism. The walkways and scenic platforms dotting Mount Qianzi provide varying perspectives of the formations. The Helong Park, named after a revered Chinese general, is a prominent spot offering 360-degree views, especially striking during sunrise or sunset when light casts dramatic shadows between the peaks. Another famed viewpoint is Yubei Feng, or the Emperor's Writing Brush Peaks, where a cluster of slender stone spires rises vertically like quills, each brush supposedly used by the Heavenly Emperor to pen edicts across the skies. In spring, you might see pink clouds of peach blossoms floating among the ridges. In fall, the entire landscape is bathed in a golden hue from changing leaves. During the early mornings, sea of clouds phenomena occur frequently, where a thick blanket of mist hovers below the peaks, making it seem as though the mountaintops are islands adrift in a vast white ocean. When combined with the golden-orange glow of dawn, this view becomes nothing short of celestial. But perhaps what makes Mount Qianzi so extraordinary is the sense it evokes, not just of natural wonder, but of timelessness. These peaks have stood for eons, weathered by rain and wind, surrounded by shifting fog and legend. They are silent observers of history, of dynasties that have risen and fallen, of forests that have bloomed and receded, of travelers who have come to marvel and left with their lives forever changed. There is no modern structure here that distracts from the natural grandeur. Everything is designed to preserve the purity of the view, the serenity of the space, and the power of the mountain. Whether you come as a hiker, an artist, a filmmaker, a philosopher, or a simple traveler yearning to see something beyond the ordinary, Mount Tianzi delivers an experience that is equal parts real and unreal, grounded in geology, but floating in fantasy. It is a rare place where the earth itself seems to dream, and where every pillar of stone becomes a prayer, a memory, or a monument to the ancient powers that shaped it. Along the eastern shores of Harbour Island, nestled in the beautiful Bahamian archipelago, lies a stretch of coastline that seems as though it was painted with a delicate brush dipped in rose and ivory, the Pink Sands Beach. This surreal shoreline, which extends for nearly 3 miles, shimmers in the sunlight with a pale blush hue, creating one of the most enchanting and otherworldly beachscapes on the planet. Unlike golden, white, or volcanic black sands found elsewhere, the sands here take on a soft pink tone that gently transitions into the turquoise waters of the Atlantic Ocean, crafting a landscape that is both tranquil and visually spellbinding. The unique coloration of Pink Sands Beach is not the work of magic, but of nature's intricate biological and geological dance. The blush tones come primarily from tiny coral organisms called foraminifera, microscopic marine creatures that have bright pink or red shells made of calcium carbonate. When these organisms die, their shells are crushed and mixed with fragments of coral, shells, and white sand, forming the signature pastel hue. The result is not an overpowering, cartoonish pink, but a subtle, pearlescent blush, a refined elegance that shifts slightly depending on the time of day and light. During sunrise and sunset, especially, the beach glows with a radiant, almost surreal warmth, as the sun's low angles amplify the rosiness of the sand and set the water ablaze in shades of peach and lavender. Located on Harbour Island, a tiny islet just off the northeastern coast of Eleuthera Island, Pink Sands Beach is only accessible by boat or ferry, preserving its atmosphere of quiet exclusivity. Despite its global fame, the beach never feels overrun. The island itself is home to only a few hundred residents, and much of the surrounding area maintains a charming, colonial-era ambience, with pastel-colored cottages, narrow flower-lined streets, and the relaxed rhythm of island life. The small town of Dunmore Town, once the capital of the Bahamas in the 18th century, still retains elements of its British loyalist roots, making a stroll through its lanes a quaint and historic experience. But the centerpiece of Harbour Island, the reason people journey from all over the world, remains the ethereal shoreline. Walking barefoot across the sand is like moving across crushed rose petals. The grains are fine, cool, and velvety, and unlike many tropical beaches, the sand never becomes scorching hot, even under direct sun. The beach is also protected by an offshore coral reef, which calms the incoming waves and creates ideal swimming conditions. The water is warm and crystal clear, with gradients of teal, aqua, and cerulean extending into the horizon. Snorkelers can often spot vibrant marine life just a few meters from shore, colorful fish, sea fans, and of course, the foraminifera themselves, which give the sand its celebrated hue. Aside from its beauty, Pink Sands Beach has earned a reputation as one of the most romantic and luxurious beach destinations in the world. It has become a favorite among honeymooners, celebrities, and anyone seeking solitude in a postcard-perfect environment. Upscale resorts like the Dunmore and Pink Sands Resort offer unobtrusive luxury. Villas tucked among palms, open-air terraces overlooking the sea, and private access to the beach. However, despite the high-end offerings, the island retains a quiet, low-key atmosphere that prioritizes preservation and harmony with nature over large-scale development. The experience of being on Pink Sands Beach is almost meditative. The landscape holds an unusual serenity, the soft whisper of gentle waves, the lull of sea breeze rustling through casuarina trees, and the distant hum of small boats make up the island's ambient soundtrack. The beach is rarely crowded, and at certain times of the day, it's possible to walk for an hour without encountering another soul, save for a few sandpipers and maybe a beachcombing egret. Even during the more active months from December to April, the atmosphere is peaceful, never chaotic. At sunrise, the entire coastline is bathed in a pearlescent light that seems to melt the boundary between land and sea. The pink of the sand intensifies, catching the early rays as if the beach itself were glowing from within. Photographers, painters, and artists frequently travel here to capture the ever-changing play of color and light, as no 2 days, or even hours, are ever quite the same. Cloudy days bring a more muted, moody charm, Stormy skies contrast dramatically with the blush sands, creating a surreal, high-contrast tableau straight from a dream. Beyond aesthetics, the ecology of Pink Sands Beach and its surrounding waters is also vital. The offshore reef system not only protects the beach from erosion but supports a thriving underwater ecosystem. Conservation efforts are active in the region, led by both governmental and private initiatives to protect the fragile marine biodiversity and ensure sustainable tourism. Local Bahamians are deeply connected to the health of these waters, and efforts to limit overdevelopment and reduce environmental impact have been a key to maintaining the pristine condition of the beach. And yet, despite all its accolades and postcards, no photograph can fully prepare one for the emotional experience of standing on Pink Sands Beach in person. There is something indescribable about the soft pink beneath your feet, the warm breeze against your skin, and the endless layers of blue unfolding before you. It evokes not just awe, but gratitude, for the beauty of our planet, for the delicate ecosystems that shape such marvels, and for the quiet places where nature still reigns in harmony. Ultimately, Pink Sands Beach is more than just a travel destination. It is a sensory poem written in sand and sea, a fusion of biology, geology, light, and time. It remains one of the world's rarest natural wonders, not because it demands attention with extremes, but because it whispers its beauty softly and invites those who listen closely to witness its calm, pastel majesty. In the heart of Alberta, Canada, nestled along the eastern edge of the Canadian Rockies, lies a man-made reservoir that, at first glance, might seem like any other pristine alpine lake. But come winter, Abraham Lake transforms into something that looks ripped straight from the pages of science fiction. As temperatures drop and the surface freezes, this lake becomes a translucent window into a surreal and otherworldly underworld, filled with frozen methane bubbles, suspended mid. Ascent beneath the thick, clear ice like glowing jellyfish or ghostly orbs trapped in time. The effect is mesmerizing, eerie, and entirely real, a rare natural phenomenon that has turned this remote Canadian water body into a bucket list destination for photographers and adventurers alike. Abraham Lake was created in 1972 following the construction of the Bighorn Dam along the North Saskatchewan River. Unlike glacially carved lakes nearby such as Lake Louise or Moraine Lake, Abraham Lake doesn't owe its existence to nature. Yet, despite its artificial origins, it has evolved into one of the most breathtaking winter spectacles in the Northern Hemisphere. A stark testament to how human-altered landscapes can still participate in nature's artistry in surprising ways. The lake stretches over 32 kilometers long and spans nearly 2 kilometers wide, surrounded by snow-capped mountains, frosted forests, and steep rocky slopes that form a dramatic backdrop for the mysterious display beneath the ice. So what exactly are these alien-like bubbles that seem to float forever, layered beneath the frozen surface? The answer lies in methane, a potent greenhouse gas that is naturally produced as organic material decays at the bottom of the lake. Bacteria residing in the sediment digest plant and animal matter and release methane as a byproduct. During warmer months, this gas escapes harmlessly into the atmosphere. But during winter, as the surface of the lake begins to freeze, the methane becomes trapped under the forming layers of ice, creating stunning white orbs, disks, and columns that resemble vertical strings of pearls or suspended constellations. These frozen bubbles vary in size and shape. Some are small, delicate puffs barely the size of a coin, while others appear in dense stacks that resemble underwater chandeliers or vertical tunnels stretching toward the surface. When the ice is clear and thick enough, often more than a meter in depth, visitors can gaze dozens of feet down through the crystal glass surface and see layer upon layer of these ghostly spheres. The visual effect is like standing on an alien world, gazing into a frozen time capsule of rising gas and molecular decay turned into sculptural art. The ice itself adds another layer of wonder. Thanks to the dry, cold conditions of Alberta's winter, the ice remains crystal clear and relatively free of snow for much of the season, especially in mid to late December. Unlike cloudier, less stable ice in more humid climates, the ice on Abraham Lake is pristine and polished, creating a seamless viewing platform into the bubble-filled world beneath. And when the sun hits the surface at just the right angle, the light refracts through the ice and methane pockets, casting an ethereal glow that shifts throughout the day, from soft blue in the early morning to brilliant silver at noon and golden orange hues as dusk approaches. But this strange phenomenon is more than just beautiful. It's also scientifically significant and environmentally sobering. Methane is a greenhouse gas more than 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide over a 100-year period. and while the methane in Abraham Lake is naturally produced, its visibility has brought attention to methane release from other sources, such as melting permafrost in the Arctic. Climate scientists study lakes like Abraham Lake to understand how warming temperatures could lead to increased methane emissions worldwide. Some researchers even believe these frozen bubbles could serve as early indicators of global methane release trends. Despite its seriousness, for most who visit Abraham Lake, the experience remains one of awe. The sounds alone are part of the magic. The ice creaks, pops, and booms underfoot as it expands and contracts with temperature changes. These noises echo across the frozen expanse, lending an eerie soundtrack to your exploration. While walking across the frozen lake may sound dangerous, during peak winter, typically from late December through February, the ice becomes thick enough to safely support foot traffic, though caution and proper gear are always recommended. Local guides and tours are available for those unfamiliar with the terrain, ensuring visitors can explore safely while learning more about the lake's formation and behavior. Photographers from all over the world flock to Abraham Lake during the bubble season, often camping out in frigid temperatures to capture the perfect shot. Sunrise and sunset are the most popular times, not only for their rich colors but for the way the low-angle light enhances the depth and texture of the bubbles beneath the ice. Long-exposure photos of the lake at dawn reveal a stunning array of pinks, oranges, and icy blues, while drone footage captures the surreal patterns from above, where the frozen lake resembles a swirling galaxy of bubbles stretching endlessly in all directions. Yet despite its growing popularity on social media and travel blogs, Abraham Lake remains relatively remote and uncrowded, especially when compared to more mainstream Canadian destinations. Reaching the lake requires a drive along the scenic David Thompson Highway, Highway 11, a lesser-known but spectacular route that winds through alpine valleys, pine-covered hills, and glacial rivers. The drive itself is part of the reward, a slow transition into a landscape where human presence begins to fade and nature reclaims its dominance. For the locals and indigenous communities in the area, Abraham Lake is not just a winter attraction but a year-round natural reservoir, teeming with wildlife, seasonal flowers, and dramatic seasonal shifts. Moose, elk, bighorn sheep, and even bears roam the surrounding woodlands, while eagles soar overhead in the crisp mountain air. Though summer brings boating and fishing, winter's icy transformation is what has earned Abraham Lake its spot on the world's list of surreal, unreal destinations. In many ways, Abraham Lake's methane bubbles symbolize the paradox of beauty and fragility in the natural world. They're a visual masterpiece, intricate, delicate, otherworldly, but also a visible reminder of the planet's changing atmosphere and hidden energies stirring beneath seemingly serene surfaces. It's this balance, between wonder and warning, mystery and message, that makes Abraham Lake not just a stunning place to visit, but one of profound reflection. To stand on its glassy surface and peer into a web of icy breath trapped from the earth below is to witness something ancient, alive, and ephemeral, a fleeting gallery of nature's most unusual sculptures. There for a season, then gone, melted back into invisibility until winter's next breath brings them back into view. Rising like fire-washed waves in a frozen ocean of sand, the Sossusvlei Dunes in Namibia's Namib Desert are among the most iconic, surreal, and otherworldly landscapes on Earth. Towering and perfectly sculpted by the wind over thousands of years, these red-orange giants, some of the highest sand dunes on the planet, with heights exceeding 300 meters, 984 feet, are the very embodiment of nature's architectural artistry. Their color shifts with the sun's position, glowing a deep rust red at dawn, shimmering golden orange at noon, and cooling into burgundy as dusk settles. The contrast between the harsh shadows and sharp ridgelines makes them appear less like natural formations and more like exaggerated oil paintings rendered in warm pigments and impossible symmetry. Located within Namib-Norcluft National Park, the largest protected area in Namibia and one of the largest in all of Africa, Sossusvlei is not a single dune but a salt and clay pan surrounded by an endless sea of shifting sands. The term Sossusvlei is often loosely used to refer to the entire region of dramatic dunes and arid plains, though in the strictest sense it refers to the actual vlei, or seasonal marsh, where water from the Tsorchab River occasionally flows, though rarely reaches, to form temporary lakes. Most years, the pan remains dry and cracked, forming a white floor that contrasts sharply with the flaming dunes around it. What makes the dunes so hypnotic, aside from their sheer scale, is their color and texture. The iron oxide in the sand gives the dunes their distinctive reddish hue, which becomes more pronounced over time as oxidation increases. Some of these dunes are believed to be over 5 million years old, making them among the oldest active dunes in the world. Their shapes are constantly evolving, shifting, stretching, and collapsing with the wind. Yet certain giants remain relatively stable, especially the larger ones that act as anchors in the desert landscape. Among these towering sculptures, Dune 45 and Big Daddy stand out as iconic figures. Dune 45, named for its proximity, 45 kilometers, from the Park's Gate, is a favorite among photographers and tourists. Standing at approximately 170 meters, 558 feet, high, its accessibility and perfect crescent shape make it the most climbed dune in Sossusvlei. The experience of ascending it at sunrise, when the eastern light casts long blue shadows on one side and illuminates the other in blazing orange, is one of the most transcendent desert experiences one can have. The sand, cool at first, warms beneath your feet as the sun climbs higher, and from the summit, the panorama unfolds like a Martian tapestry, an endless ripple of dunes reaching beyond the horizon. But the true titan of the region is Big Daddy, often considered the tallest dune in Sossusvlei and reaching a staggering 325 meters, 1,066 feet, in height. Scaling Big Daddy is a challenge even for the fit. The ascent is grueling as each step sinks backward in the soft, dry sand, but the reward at the top is unmatched, a 360-degree view of the desert's fluid sculpture garden, including a direct overlook into Deadvlei, the famous white clay pan littered with ancient, dead camel thorn trees. From here, you can run, roll, or slide your way down the steep slope in an exhilarating descent into the basin below, a vertical drop that feels like falling into another world. Deadvlei, located at the foot of Big Daddy, is a destination in itself, and part of the same surreal composition that makes Sossusvlei so iconic. While we've spoken of it before, its connection to the dunes enhances the feeling of being in a dreamscape. Blackened, sun-charred trees stand like skeletal fingers on a bone-white floor, frozen in time against a wall of vibrant orange. The juxtaposition is so stark, so visually arresting, that it feels digitally altered, and yet it is 100% real, unchanged for nearly a millennium. Despite the apparent lifelessness of the desert, Sossusvlei is far from dead. This harsh, arid environment is home to resilient desert-adapted creatures, such as the oryx or gemsbok, a striking antelope with long, spear-like horns, whose silhouette often graces postcards of the Namib. You may also encounter springbok, ostriches, beetles that harvest fog with their bodies, and even small reptiles like the shovel-snouted lizard, which performs a thermal dance to keep its feet from burning in the midday sand. Water is rare, but when it comes, usually in the form of sporadic summer rains, it can transform Sossusvlei overnight. The Tsorchab River, normally dry, flows through narrow gorges and into the pan, creating shallow, reflective pools that last for days or weeks. These ephemeral lakes shimmer under the dunes, turning the desert into a mirror world where sand meets sky, and the towering dunes appear to float on glass. Flamingos have even been spotted feeding in these temporary pools, making it a surreal convergence of desert and wetland. Reaching Sossusvlei requires a bit of effort. Most visitors stay in the nearby town of Cesrium, a small settlement named after the 6 leather thongs, says Riem in Afrikaans, required to draw water from the deep Cesrium Canyon. From here, the road into the dunes is an early morning journey timed to catch the golden hour. The last stretch of the road, around 5 kilometers, is deep sand, accessible only by 4x4, adding to the sense of entering a place not entirely meant for humans. But that inaccessibility helps preserve the mystique and pristine silence of the dunes. There's something deeply humbling about standing alone atop one of these giants. The wind blows across the ridge like a whisper, the grains of sand shift beneath your feet, and all around you, the desert breathes in slow, ancient rhythms. There are no sounds but your heartbeat and the dry hiss of the breeze. The dunes do not shout, they do not rush. They simply exist, sculpted by forces older than humanity, indifferent to time, and radiant with a color and stillness that seems too perfect to belong to this world. For all their visual grandeur, the Sossusvlei dunes also hold deeper symbolic weight. They represent the persistence of form in a sea of change, the triumph of beauty in a place of supposed barrenness, and the quiet voice of earth whispering its stories in ripples of sand. For travelers who journey here, it's more than a photographic destination. It's an encounter with the sublime, a brush with the unreal that reminds us just how diverse, dramatic, and deeply mysterious our planet can be. Tucked into the rugged cliffs of the Faroe Islands, surrounded by sweeping green moorlands, puffin-haunted skies, and a moody Atlantic horizon, Gasadalu Waterfall, also known as Mulaffa, is a place that seems carved out of a dream. This dramatic cascade of water plunging directly from the land's edge into the ocean is not just a scenic marvel. It is the embodiment of the Faroe Islands' mystical remoteness and quiet, unyielding beauty. The image of the waterfall, with its sheer drop into the foaming sea, set against the picturesque village of Gsadalur, has become an icon of Nordic isolation and natural poetry. The Faroe Islands, an autonomous territory within the Kingdom of Denmark, are a remote archipelago located between Iceland and Norway in the North Atlantic Ocean. They are often overlooked in travel discussions, and perhaps that's what has helped preserve their untouched mystique. With their dramatic volcanic topography, grass-roofed houses, and coastal cliffs that look torn from the pages of a fantasy novel, the Faroes seem to exist in a world entirely apart from the modern rush. And within this already spectacular setting lies Mulaffa, the crown jewel of the village that shares its name. Gsadalur village, perched just above the falls, is home to only a handful of residents, sometimes fewer than 20, and has historically been one of the most isolated settlements in the islands. Until 2004, the only way to reach it was via a strenuous hike over a steep mountain pass or by helicopter. The village's seclusion was so extreme that basic services were difficult to maintain, and many residents left for more accessible parts of the islands. Then came the construction of a tunnel carved through the mountain, linking Gsadalur with the rest of Vagar Island and making it possible to drive in and out, though the village has still retained its tranquil, end-of-the-world character. From the edge of the village, a short walk leads to the viewpoint from Mulaffa, and what unfolds before your eyes seems like something imagined rather than real. The waterfall bursts from a river flowing through the meadows, crashes over a cliffside so sheer it looks sculpted, and free falls nearly 60 meters, 200 feet, directly into the churning Atlantic below. On clear days, the water catches the sunlight and shimmers as it drops, creating a vertical ribbon of white against the dark basalt cliffs. On misty or rainy days, and such days are frequent in the Faroes, the scene transforms into something even more haunting. Fog cloaks the mountain ridges, the sea turns slate grey, and the waterfall becomes a ghostly streak tumbling into nothingness. What amplifies the sense of wonder is the surrounding landscape. Behind the falls rise tall cliffs covered in lush grass and dotted with sheep, nearly as numerous as the people in the Faroes, and above that, the green shoulders of Heinanva Mountain frame the background with quiet majesty. Looking out toward the sea, your eyes meet the distant silhouettes of Mykines Island, often veiled in cloud or sea mist, giving a sense of endlessness beyond the horizon. It's this marriage of height and depth, water and stone, isolation and openness, that makes the scene so visually overwhelming. Despite its serenity, the environment here is anything but soft. The North Atlantic is notorious for its volatile weather, and the cliffs that hold Mulaffa have borne the brunt of countless storms. The Faroese say you can experience all 4 seasons in a single day, and indeed, the weather may shift from bright sunshine to gale-force winds to rain and back again before an hour has passed. And yet, it is precisely this rawness and unpredictability that adds depth to the experience. The waterfall seems not just a part of the land, but a force of its own, reacting to wind, tide, and sky in a continuous, living performance. For photographers, Mulaffa is a canvas that never looks the same twice. At sunrise, the cliffs glow gold and the Atlantic horizon becomes a lavender blue sheet. During heavy storms, waves crash violently against the rocks below the falls, sometimes throwing sea spray high enough to merge with the descending water. At night, under the right conditions, the aurora borealis has been known to flicker over the village, turning the scene into something entirely otherworldly. But for all its visual drama, Mulaffa is not a tourist trap. It is still quiet, local, sacred to those who live nearby. There are no fences, no ticket booths, no throngs of vendors or artificial walkways. You simply walk into the meadow, find a spot to sit, and let the elements and the solitude do the rest. It's this absence of infrastructure, this preservation of place, that makes the experience so powerful. There is a distinct sense that you are not visiting a landmark, you are entering a moment, and the landscape is inviting you to be still and listen. Many who visit Gsadalur describe feeling a strange stillness wash over them, a peace that feels ancient, as though the wind itself were humming old Faroese songs. There's a humility that comes from standing at the edge of the earth, watching water fall without pause into the vast ocean, untouched by crowds, advertisements, or noise. It feels like a secret, one you're fortunate enough to stumble into. And the people of Gsadalur, though few, are deeply connected to the land. Life here is shaped by the seasons, the sheep, the tides, and the mountains. While modern amenities now exist thanks to the road, the community still thrives on old rhythms. You might see locals tending gardens or walking through the fog with dogs by their sides. They don't just live near the waterfall, they live with it. It's part of their stories, part of their mornings and evenings, part of the background music to their lives. For those willing to travel to the ends of the earth, or at least to a wind-lashed promontory in the North Atlantic, Mulaffa is more than a destination. It is a visual hymn, a poem written in water and stone. It captures the soul of the Faroe Islands, quiet yet powerful, remote yet inviting, stark yet profoundly beautiful. It stands as proof that the unreal isn't always far from reach. Sometimes it's just hidden in the mists, waiting patiently for the curious to arrive. This video is for educational or entertainment purposes only, and information provided in the video may be incorrect. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing to the channel and like the video.